All right, it's 7 o'clock. I call this meeting of the District 59 Board of Education to order. Can I get a roll call?
Zach,
Present.
Espino present, Johnson,
Present.
Mancilla,
Present.
Stager,
Present.
Schumacher, and Chesney.
Present.
Okay.
All right, let's do the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, 3.0 would be board recognition presentations. This would be normally where we would have schools do presentations, that sort of thing. We're just going to leave it in there. There's not one today because school's not in session. So we'll move on to comments and suggestions from the public. So who grabs the list? All right, Michelle Notini. Oh, I can read let me read my little spiel. Okay, so prior to public, you can come up. This is the point in the meeting where we welcome public comments. Tonight is a regularly scheduled Board of Education business meeting. The purpose of the meeting is for the board to properly address the items on the agenda publicly as required by the Open Meetings Act. To allow the board the time needed to address all agenda items, we ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. A board member will serve as timekeeper and will give the speaker notice when there are 30 seconds remaining to allow the speaker time to complete or summarize their thoughts. Public comment during a business meeting is a time for the board to listen to comments from the public, but this is not a time for two-way discussion between the board and the public. Please understand the board will not ask nor answer questions. If you have questions or wish to have a response to any item, please submit your comments in writing, and the superintendent will follow up with a response. We also want to remind those in attendance that this meeting is being video live streamed. The video of the meeting will also be archived and available for viewing after the meeting has adjourned. For those of you sharing a public comment, please be mindful that you're being broadcast live and your comment will also be included in the video archive. Due to the need to conduct the full meeting in a timely manner, the board will allow for a maximum of 60 minutes for public comments this evening. I don't think you'll take it.
So, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before the board. I speak to you today as a longtime member of the community of Robert Parents. Section 6.10 of the School Board Policy Manual labeled
Section 6.10 of the School Board Policy Manual labeled Educational Philosophy and Objectives describes a crucial factor of the policy as the ability of the district to attract and retain talented, dedicated, and caring staff members committed to their own professional development as well as to the development of academically prepared, upstanding individuals. Staff retention is also described in Goal 4 of the current strategic plan, which provides for the strategy to attract, develop, and retain high-quality and culturally diverse staff. My family has been fortunate in that we have had teachers who have weathered the storm of the ever-changing landscape in education and the extreme curriculum decisions made by District 59. They found a way to put student learning and well-being first, regardless of the pressure put on them. Much-needed curriculum improvements are being made. However, the pressures continue. As a result, we are seeing a multitude of well-respected, effective, and loved teachers leaving the district. They are not leaving to be closer to home or to spend more time with their family. They are leaving because they do not feel valued by the administration in their schools or the district. They are leaving because academic expectations are consistently being ignored and students are not being held accountable for their learning. They are leaving because discipline policies have allowed disruptive and often dangerous behaviors to perpetuate and have made students and staff feel unsafe. At Friendship since January 22, 14 teachers have resigned, 3 have taken early retirement, and 6 have requested a change in schools or position. Many have spent their entire careers in District 59. This includes 3 teachers in the advanced program my children were so fortunate to have. These are teachers who taught and inspired students to reach their full potential and also made significant contributions to their buildings and district. As a parent of high school and college students, I can assure you that all of the preparation provided by these teachers was absolutely necessary. Grades, tests, studying, homework, time management, it all matters. All of the resignations of teachers and administrators appear on a
30
consent
seconds.
agenda report, which you all vote on. But please know the reasons are well communicated to the Human Resources Department. As the leaders of this district, please work together and understand and address this concerning situation. The district is trying hard to get back on track with academic achievement. This will not occur if we lose our most respected teachers. The district is looking to fill many new positions. How can we attract and retain new staff in this environment? At a minimum, exit retention and staff satisfaction data can be reviewed, as well as academic and discipline policies. Please do not let financial constraints be an issue in any way. The recent financial audit report indicates 64% of the district's tax base is commercial and industrial, which means the district is receiving taxes on property which will never provide students.
Thank
The
you.
result is very
Thank you.
well-funded reserves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your
Mhm.
Yeah, actually, if you have a full written statement, we can include the entire thing.
Sure, and because there was one sentence I couldn't read.
Let me read one more sentence.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so that moves us on to superintendent reports. Spring benchmarking update. This is the thing I really want to see.
I'm excited to be here tonight and share our spring benchmarking end of year data report. This is something we do 3 times a year and really ties to summative data we collect on basically all of our students in reading and math. So to jump right in, this is part of our strategic plan. And actually, we're just starting year 3 of the strategic plan. And a big part of that was an aligned assessment system to ensure we had data to help us determine how the system was doing. As part of that process, the board set a performance target connected to goal 1, student growth. And that goal is that 80% or more of our students across all groups will be adequately supported in Tier 1 instruction, as evidenced by the branching line report. Basically, what that means is we want kids, and we have some research up there, at the 25th percentile or above, as many as possible. Our goal is 80%. The idea being then in our classrooms, we can meet the needs of kids. If I have a class of 20 and I'm at that 80%, I have 4 kids who might be Tier 2 or 3, and the other 16 are Tier 1, and we can meet those needs and intervene and support kids. So that's been our goal these last few years, and we're working towards it.
Just to acknowledge how high that goal is. If we were nationally normed, our district matched the national average, 75% of our students would fall above the 25th percentile. We're saying we want to get it.
We want to get to 80.
So we only do that by pushing this above the national.
Yes, that's correct. So as we jump in, just to build some background, I've shared this a few times knowing we have some new board members, but this is a end of year student report that we have access to. Kids take this assessment on a computer. It can take 60 minutes. They have opportunities to go in and out. They don't have to complete it at one setting, but it's an adaptive assessment. And when we say adaptive, basically you start the test, you get it right, question gets harder. Get it wrong, question gets easier to find a student's level of proficiency. For this student, if you see over here, they started out at a 430. This is a 7th grader, and they were placed at the 2nd grade level, the 6th percentile. So you see, as they went through the year, they made great progress through the winter and actually met their typical growth target, which is basically a year and a half a year. and then end the year at a 489. And you can see they exceeded their stretch goal and really just got very close to moving into grade. Still behind, but made a ton of progress over the course of that year. You can see on the left-hand side over here, we have the typical growth target. So their target was 13 points. They made 59, which is a pretty big percentage. And typical growth, as I said, is about a year. The big one for us is stretch growth goal. Stretch growth is this idea of ambitious but attainable growth. So if you're 2 years behind, how do we get you onto grade level? And one nice part, helpful part of iReady, at least from our perspective, is they don't expect that to happen in a year, especially for older students. Question? Yes, please jump in.
Yes. So is this a real student?
This is a real student.
Okay, I know we're going to be celebrating the district as a whole, but this student had an amazing year.
The student had an amazing
They
year.
went from 6th percentile to 32nd percentile. They would have been in the 3 grades or more behind group, and now they're 1 grade behind.
Right. And now they're in that tier 1 instructional level that we believe we can meet the needs in the classroom.
Right. So I know we're going to be celebrating the district as a whole, but whoever the student is, great job. I bet they're anonymous, but I just want to celebrate.
I know who they are. And I wanted to throw in another example because you see, so we started with a student that was multiple years behind. Now here's a student who was basically on grade level at the start of 7th grade. And you can see, so their target for typical growth is smaller, their stretch growth is smaller, but they still made some great progress and moved from the 79th percentile to the 96th. Now there is a reality, there are kids that don't make that kind of progress. We know that those are kids that we really target for intervention, and really are working on the system as a whole to meet the needs of all kids, but these are a couple great examples. This next piece, I apologize, I added this today, and reflecting over the weekend and preparing, I realized that one thing we've explained these last few years in regards to our reporting, this benchmark, the KPI piece, is it's based on Branchy Minds. This is information right out of Branchy Minds. This is the tier report. What's different about Branchy Minds tiers and what we report is, you can see here, they actually remove students who get IEP services in math or reading. So you can see 309 kids are pulled out of this. So the actual tier 1 is higher than what we'll report tonight. It's 72% when you pull those kids who get IEP supports out. Branchy Minds' belief, at least the way I understand it, is that kids who get those supports aren't in tier 1 instruction, so they pull them out of the mix. So that's about 200 kids in each group. One group that we do keep out is our ELS and SIP students, cross-categorical. They are students who are in specialized district programs and actually aren't in tier 1 instruction on a normal basis. So just as an awareness item, when we start to get in the data, it looks a little different than what the Branchy Minds actual tier report looks like. All right, let's jump in. So this is our math KPI results. So we wanted to focus on the district goals. You can see at the very top, that's our spring result, 69.3%. This spring, we started the year at 65.2 in the fall. So we had a very nice 4.1 percentage point increase over the course of the year. Moved some kids out of tier 2 and moved a good percentage of kids out of tier 3. Then I also wanted to provide, what last year looked like to build some context. It's nice to have consistent data over a few years, and to see what kind of growth we're seeing. Now, different kids move in, kids move out, whole grade levels leave, but from a math perspective, this data is really very solid, and we're moving to that point of we're gonna, I would assume next year be in the 70s, actually both reading and math.
And Tom, do we have any data that shows, probably not because of the timeline of when I already started and when the new math curriculum started, to compare old math curriculum versus new ones?
So yes and no is the way I would. So we started iReady actually the year before for math, the year before we moved the new curriculum forward. But that was also a year of COVID, world, teach from home. We saw, and actually I already saw a lot of data that fall where kids did the best they ever did because they were being assessed at home, especially younger kids. I think the assumption is parents, grandparents, family members might have helped them a little bit, which is understandable. So we have some comparisons. And we didn't have that for reading. We used a different system for reading.
Yeah,
Okay.
the apples to apples comparison we'll have is the school report card, the IAR. right?
So when
That was
we,
pre-pandemic through.
yeah, so when that's released in October officially to the public, we can look at across multiple years of data, reading and math, and really get red apples to red apples comparison.
But this basically covers the math rollout.
Yes, this is
First
for the
year
2
and
years of
second year.
math. Absolutely correct.
9 percentage point gain.
This is a breakdown by grade levels, and really what it's showing is what I apologize. I share a lot of data in these opportunities. So I wanted to show fall, winter, spring. So you can see for kindergarten, if we get over here, in the fall we were at 63.4, in the winter 68.6, and ended the year at 72.4. Then I also thought it's important to show where were we last year at kindergarten, and we were at 69%. And you could see how that flows then for each grade level in regards to the KPI. Where,
Can I
please,
just ask real quick, when in the fall, when in the winter, when in the spring are the assessments?
so we usually let school, about the first 3 weeks of school in the fall is the assessment opportunity. These past few years, we've right before winter break, have done the winter benchmark in that period of time. And then this year we are the last 3 weeks of May that we pull that out. Usually it's the first 2 weeks are the assessment, then we have a time for makeup if kids missed and things like that. So it's usually about a 3-week window in those periods.
Yeah, I'm just, because I'm just curious how I would expect from like spring to fall for there to be like a drop off, not a gain. So I don't know.
So that is something we've looked at, and I think when we come back in the fall, we'll be able to show where we were in the spring, and then fall, and then compare to the previous fall. So there's often that summer learning loss that we'd want to look at. That's a great point.
But I think research into adaptive tests show that that may not be the case commonly.
Got it.
That kids do mature over the summer and do develop certain aspects of math knowledge.
Got it. So you can see grade levels across the board, and a great piece of this data from my perspective, all actually from when you compare to last year improved. And honestly, there's 33 data points up there, or 36, and we improved in 33. Then one thing we've started to look at also is, so those are grade levels static. Now, how did kindergarten going into first grade do? Or first to second, and these are cohort groups. Not true cohorts. A true cohort would literally be, we'd take every kid out this year who wasn't here last year. We just look at the grade levels just to get an idea of what the data looks like. And most of the grade levels showed some pretty significant solid improvement. Not all, but I think second to third grade was our one that didn't in math. So again, it shows as those kids move through, we're seeing some progress. Next piece is schools. And all of our schools, you can see, again, it's fall, winter, spring. All made, except for one, made fall to spring growth. Most made fall to winter and winter to spring. And most compared to last year did better also, 12 out of 14 schools. We saw some dips in the winter, but recovery. And overall, I think the way I look at this piece of data especially is where did they start and where did they end? Because you can see all of our schools start in a pretty different place, in some cases pretty significantly different. Then, since the KPI is all groups, we also look at our race and ethnicity groups. So you can see how, again, that played out across our groups this year. And one of the things we talk a lot about and look a lot at as a district, especially our MTS team, is where are those gaps? Where do we see some big separations, especially when it's groups of similar size? If you look at that Hawaiian Pacific Islander, it's about 22 kids. So a few kids can change that result pretty significantly. But if we look at American Indian compared to Asian or white, and then of course Hispanic, yes, to non-Hispanic, those are those gaps that we really focus in on as we work on curriculum and training and supports for kids. Then we also have our other demographics, free and reduced lunch, multilingual, IEP, male, female. And again, while all of those groups, just about all of those groups made progress, I think we were 34 out of 36 here. You can still see those gaps that stand out between some of our groups. Yes, which is, if you looked at last year, you can see it was, there was a separation there. It really balanced out this year.
So I know I point this out almost every time, but the free and reduced group is already above the 80% KPI. And the non-free
Non-free and reduced,
the free
correct.
and reduced group is below them, but I don't remember if you put this information in here, they showed the same amount of growth. So there's not an opening gap there.
We did not extend that gap, but there's
Right.
still
But
a
they're
large gap.
both going up in conjunction
Yes,
with each other.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but we'd like to, have that one stay here and reach it.
Well, not free and reduced will eventually hit a plateau. There'll be a certain point they can't go up.
Yeah, on this type of test, yes.
What's the definition of former multilingual?
So the former multilingual were students who qualified for second language services when they entered the district, or however, whether they started with us or joined us, but then they take a test every year called Access. And if you reach a certain level of proficiency on Access, it's a 4.8, you actually move out of the multilingual program, you're considered former.
Even if you're still in dual language.
Even if you're still in dual language, you might still be in that program, but you're no longer considered a multilingual or an EL learner in the sense of how this data or the state uses that data. And you can see that group is quite successful. I think our highest performing group.
So do you think that is just directly related to them being better students in general, that they're testing out of there, so that of course their scores are going to be higher?
I think it could be a combination of a lot of things. If you're able to, in the 8 years and you're in the district, learn and utilize multiple languages in different academics, my thinking is we have some pretty high level of skills to be able to do that. It's a pretty large group, 600 plus kids. To say I can prove that, I don't know that I can prove that, but
Can
they're
I
pretty
jump
successful.
in really quick on that?
Yeah, please.
On a personal experience, my fifth grader is in the dual language for Spanish, obviously, and she just tested out from the Access test. And comparing her with my oldest, who didn't, she was just like a regular bilingual class. Stacy is like, she is more faster and more advanced in a lot of things just by being around different people. It's just truly amazing that they're learning the exact same thing, but just being around other students that speak other languages. It's just her, like her proficiency in reading and writing is so much like faster than Luna. Luna's going into 8th grade, and she still hasn't tested out.
There's likely some brain research out there that the connections in multiple languages kids can make might improve their performance, especially on these types of tests. Yeah, please.
Former multi. Mom speaks Polish, right? So I qualify, but I pass Access in kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Am I considered former?
Then you would be a former in first grade.
Another question, sorry.
Yeah, no, I love questions.
The multilingual.
Wait, I'm sorry. Could we go back? Because I want to make sure we clarify that. So do you mean that they qualified for the program
Well,
based on their screener score, or
Right,
they
it's-
never qualified based on their initial test?
no, I'm asking, you would qualify for multilingual services, right? If you have one parent who speaks a language
No.
other than English. Okay.
That's where
Thank you.
I'm glad I caught that. So that is when you do the home language survey and you indicate that you have a family member in your home who speaks another language, that may then trigger the screener, the language screener. The screener then determines your score on that test, determines whether or not you qualify for second language services.
Okay.
So if you are a student, just because you have a family member that speaks another language does not necessarily mean you are designated as a multilingual learner.
Got you. So I don't necessarily qualify for services.
Correct.
Okay. But
And that's what this is differentiating. This is actually students who qualified based on their screener for services,
Okay.
whether they received them or not. And then they took the test and no longer qualify.
that falls into the
Gotcha.
former
Okay.
multilingual.
I was really impressed by that number.
It's a
by the
nice
way.
number. Yes.
Mhm.
It really supports the tenets of true dual language. That's the research right there, which really is remarkable.
Do we have a breakdown of this data by program that we have kids in?
I don't have it in this presentation, but it's something we can definitely put together and share it out in the board update.
Very interesting.
All right.
Tom, before you go or before you flip the page, can you remind me again the iReady test? Is it in Spanish and Polish, or is it
They
all?
you can have the opportunity for Spanish in math.
Mhm.
There is no other language available besides English for that assessment.
Mhm.
All right, awesome. Reading. So now as we move into reading, again, similar format, you can see we're ending the year actually at the same rate as math, 69.3%. That's a 2.9% increase. We also had some reductions in tier 2 and tier 3. So basically everyone's moving over. And you can see then how that compares to where we were last year. So some nice growth and improvement. As you look at grade levels, similar. One thing you'll see, we'll have a little more variation here. Math is very consistent in all those areas growing. Now we'll see some bouncing up and down a little bit, not all grade levels being consistent across the board. Yet we're still making some good progress. I think 7 of 9 grade levels made fall to spring growth this year, and 8 out of 9 in comparison to last year. Well, so from an iReady assessment perspective, we're looking at 2 years. You can see, I believe the highest for last year was 6th grade, 73.9%. And this year, our highest was 73.6% in 7th grade. So actually that makes sense because last year, those 6th graders, this year, they're 7th graders. So, we only have a few years of data in connection to this. And again, from a KPI perspective, this is the amount of kids who are in that 25th percentile or above. Because that's a standardized process, you'll never have 100% of your kids. It's basically the test is designed so that won't happen. It's designed to sort kids and put them in the categories. So then we have the cohort piece. So again, the cohorts made some nice progress, 6 out of 8, compared to last year, growth into this year. When we look at our schools, you can see we have 2 schools that are above that 80% target, a couple approaching that. We're in the 70s, a few in the 50s. Majority making progress from fall, winter to spring, and in comparison to last year. If I'm going too fast, please slow me down. Race and ethnicity piece, you can see again how that shakes out. Some gaps there, but we're seeing some nice progress. Then our demographic piece. We'll point it out here as well. Not 300 is already above the 80. As is our not multilingual and former multilingual. Okay, so those were the KPIs. Again, a major part of the strategic plan piece. We've had a couple great years of growth. I look at that as system growth. The system's getting better. We get new kids, we get new staff. The system continues to move. We hope and expect to see that again as we move into next year. So then we shift to achievement. So we go from this KPI piece, that percentile, to how are kids doing in regards to achievement on the iReady assessment across all these different grade levels. So you see they have a bunch of categories that we have basically on grade level early on, 1 below, 2 below, and 3+ below. And then you can see how this is our spring data right over here of how we've done. So we made some nice progress. Basically, the first number is winter to spring. The second number, in this case 25, is fall to spring. And then what we really appreciate about from iReady and wish we had it for demographics and lots of different data, they give us some data on other Illinois school districts and also across the nation. When we started working with iReady, there were about 2.5 million kids in the nation. Now they're up to almost 7.5.
So these benchmarks are iReady users in Illinois
And nationwide. So that gives us an idea. One, it's very helpful to know, like to Mardell's question, what's good? Okay, well, we seem to be in alignment with Illinois and the nation on the math side. And it gives us an idea of what targets we should have. This is, on the achievement side, this is a Common Core, heavy, high expectation assessment. Because most people would say only 32% of your kids are on grade level. That's it's not great, but at the same time, the assessment and the expectations are so high, you can see how that then flows across the nation as a whole with this assessment. And that was really a move a number of years ago and really ties to IAR also. You'll see the highest scores you'll see in the state when you talk about proficiency for IAR will be 60% of the kids. Most districts are in the 30s and the 40s because the expectation level is so high with the assessment.
Does iReady let you drill down the data to compare comparable districts that have our same demographics?
We have not. We've asked them about the demographics piece, and actually I even got some recent feedback. A lot of their districts don't give them demographic information. So they're unable to provide that. That's why when we will get to it in a second, we'll look at like grade levels because we can do some comparisons.
But before you move on, I've been waiting for this slide for a long time because we finally have caught up to the state of Illinois' average.
Well, I think we passed them.
And we've exceeded the state of Illinois average, and we're catching up towards that national norm pre-pandemic.
Yes.
So this district is catching
That's a
up.
great point. So one thing they've put together is our going back pre-pandemic, how did school districts do across the country?
Yes, we're not just beating ourselves pre-pandemic, we're catching up to everyone pre-pandemic.
Yes. And really, from my perspective, and you'll see it'll be a little bit different for reading. It ties to that
Yeah,
math.
and I know it's not a one-to-one tie-in, but we will get a state report card. The IAR does correlate with this somewhat.
It does.
And I'm real excited.
We're looking
for
forward to
October,
that
yeah,
data also.
for-
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So then we get into grade levels. So again, I apologize, very busy, but what I'm trying to provide here, we'll just go right to 8th grade. You can see fall, winter, spring, fall, winter, spring. Then the orange is last year. The red is where the nation's at.
For spring.
For spring.
Mhm.
So you get an idea of how do we do in comparison to ourselves, our last year, and then how do we compare to the nation across all these grade levels. And it's very extremely positive data. Actually, it's a 50 out of 50. There are 50 data points there. All of them exceed and improve. So then the cohort piece, now that changes a little bit. You see kindergarten to 1st grade, you see that there's a drop there.
And I wanted to point out that drop. Is this an issue of just open sequence aligning with the test sort of
Some
thing?
would argue that a kindergarten level of expectations as you move into end of year 1st grade, it's a pretty big significant
because
shift.
we don't see that drop continuing.
No.
It comes back up, which means maybe we taught something slightly
Sure.
after the already expected us
If I wanted to
sort of thing.
really dig into the cohort data and spend the time to do that, I'd probably focus on kindergarten to really see who those kids are. Because you do see a lot of movement of kids in early years of school. Then when we look at our schools, again, you can see where we flow from fall, winter to spring, some very significant growth over the course of the year on the achievement side at every school. And then how they compare. Again, we can't grab national data or state data connected to this, so we're really just looking at in comparison to last year.
I just want to give a shout out to Juliet Lowe. It's going to come up in reading as well.
So Juliet Lowe, you can see this fall to
the
our
growth
winter to
is
spring.
amazing.
They made some, and where they were last year at the end of the year was 37%. They're at 62. We got it going on.
So can I ask a question? So
Yes.
if tier 1 means I just get regular support, does this mean the support of there's fewer kids in tier, or just different kids qualify now for tier 2 and tier 3 support?
So different data, but in a sense, obviously, the higher the achievement, the higher number of kids that are going to be in that 80% or above KPI. So if I think about, again, back to that class, if I have a class where our school's at 80%, I might have 3 or 4 kids that need some extra support. I might get that through intervention. I might do small groups in my class, where if I'm in a school that's on the lower end, I might have 8 or 9 kids who need that support in my class or from the outside. So that can impact that classroom. The quote on the front was talking about critical mass. If we can get to 80%, that what we can do in classrooms just changes from if most of my kids need extra support or are 2 or 3 years behind. I have to work with them to bring them up while other kids might be waiting for additional instruction.
Yeah, that, I guess that's kind of my point. So as more get to that 80% threshold, it kind of snowballs because we can take more resources to fewer kids.
Exactly. So we could, I know, in a great example, an intervention teacher might have 10 kids in their intervention. That's a lot of kids. What if it was 3? The level of support for 3 kids in a 40-minute period versus 10 is very, very different. So you nailed it. The interventionist piece could, I think, where from a district MTS perspective, we want to meet the needs of kids in class, not through some sort of pull out or intervention where they might lose out. And I'll be honest, I think a number of years ago, when I was a principal, we took kids out of tier 1 to give them intervention. So they weren't getting grade level instruction. So we want all kids in grade level instruction. As we moved forward with more interventionists, that was part of that plan. We got to make that up. We got to fill in those gaps for some kids. So you're correct, but at the same time, we need those kids in tier 1 instruction to get grade level.
Absolutely. The reason I'm asking and stating is because I remember last year there was a conversation about how we cannot give the tier 2, tier 3, or 2, 3 grades behind the intervention as they need, because we don't have enough interventionists.
Didn't have enough interventionists, or in some cases, our intervention system was equally distributed. So a school that had was at the 80% might have the same amount of interventionists as someone who's at the 50. So I think that was a big shift in our system this year to assign staff to where that need is.
What I'd be curious to see is how is the distribution right now between the schools? Just curious.
For
interventionist,
I think.
Yeah, and we have that as well as data that shows like how many students are able to be served now, which is something that we are tracking really well since last year. So I think that's going to be great information that we'll report on through our MTSS system. And that resource allocation is very much needs-based as opposed to just equal for each school.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see here, and I just want to, can we go back? Because yes, Juliet Lowe, huge shout out, but all our schools and the growth that was made when it's where you're starting from, like we want that achievement at grade level, but the growth, and we have to factor in where are we starting from and where do we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at everyone's bar is equal, if not greater than last year at spring, which I think shows as a system, we are fixing tier 1. And then we are able to really utilize effectively tier 2 and tier 3.
Yeah. Tricia Seni, our coordinator of assessment at MTSS, has kind of this mantra of we can't intervene our way out. We can't, got to get kids to tier 1 and at grade level instruction. And the quicker we can do that the right way, the better. So I think, yeah, we're all on the same page with that.
One concern that I do have here is the friendship. I don't see. It's still the same thing, like the same level, right?
For friendship, they made progress in the year, but in comparison to last year, yes, they did not. They're at the same level.
Do we have any idea, or have you guys done any analysis of what the drop off is happening at the middle school level? Because it seems like they're all over the place in elementary school, and then there's a consistent sort of leveling down at the junior high
Yes.
level.
No, I think one, whether it's achievement, the KPI you accumulate, that accumulation of what you have to learn, the skills and strategies you have to have as you move through your career, it accumulates the things. I know exactly what you're saying. This helps me a lot with that when I can say, it looks like everyone levels down. That's not good at all, but at least from a perspective of when we look at middle school grade levels, that seems to be a consistent piece in regards to those expectations. We actually, and it'll pop up in a few of the slides, have looked at and are continuing to look at our transition from 5th to 6th grade, because we can pretty consistently see a drop in 6th grade for kids. And then they recover. 7th grade has had a tremendous growth this past year. But what is that about that transition that is impacting kids as they move from 5th to 6th? And actually part of our transition planning for the future is to really dig in that, because our schools do a great job, especially on the SEL side, of transitioning kids to the middle school and junior highs and being prepared for it. But academically, there seems to be something that's impacting.
And I would say research base is, we know the biggest bang for our buck is early intervention. So my prediction is that when we are 6 years into this, that's when we're going to see it pick up, because it is exactly what Tom just said, that years of accumulation. If you're starting 6th grade 3 years behind, that is an incredible mountain to climb in a very diverse, fast-paced, high expectation setting. In addition to everything else that's changing in your lives when you are, 11 and 12 years old. So I think when we start to see these things climb in our primary grades, that's when it's going to set a foundation for those kids. It's really hard to play catch up mid-course when they've had, those 6th graders have had, 5 years without this math program. Those are the most, that is their foundation in their math. And so to do mid-course curriculum tier 1 changes, it's really challenging to see it catch up on the upper ends.
And that's really this past few years, we've rolled out that WIN piece at the junior high for students, built it into the schedule to provide interventions for students. And I know next year there'll even be more opportunities. This last slide, again, craziness, but this is because I think it's important, and your questions show that we're all focused on what about those kids that are behind. This is a graph of kids who are 2 and 3+ years behind by school. The first line is where they started the year, that's fall. Second is winter, and third is spring. So if we look at Bird, started the year at 40%. They have 300 kids. That's 120 kids. They're ending the year at 11%. Last year they were at 18. So the reality of that system is having an impact on those kids over the course of the school year. So that intervention piece and really the work that's going on in the classroom on a daily basis is significantly changing that piece. But to all of the points about junior high, it's harder to get that growth, and we're starting at a pretty high level. Better than last year, but not good enough.
I guess what extra remediations are happening then? As we know that this is going on, and you're right that early intervention is super important and is a great predictor of what's going to happen. But that's in 6 years. So what's going on with these kids? You brought in that New York Times piece, and Thomas Kane, that Harvard economist, he writes that a multi-pronged approach to interventions is the way that you get growth, right? So the best districts are not only doing an interventionist surge, right, which we've done, which is fantastic, right? But they're doing an interventionist surge and extended school day, or they're doing an interventionist surge and before and after school tutoring. So has there been any further exploration of additional strategies in addition to an interventionist surge setting?
So I think that it would probably be good to go over what we currently have in place, because I think the change to our block scheduling, which extended academic time in the area of math in particular, which was all over the place prior to 2 years ago across our 3 junior highs, and even prior to this year, that WIN time where we actually have a block where you're not losing tier 1 instruction in order to get your intervention. Dr. Ossel, do you want to share a little bit too about some of those other strategies that are currently in place?
Sure.
in regards to intervention over the last year, we made significant changes, and going into next year, we have many more to come. And that multi-pronged approach is really thinking about how our curricular resources in Tier 1 change to support the needs of all learners, so that as students are receiving intervention, they're also being supported in their core class with that strategy, that skill that they are being taught in intervention, and those things are overlapping. So while they may be meeting with an interventionist at one point in the day and learning a specific skill and strategy, they're then practicing that and getting reinforcement within their core because we've changed that resource to be more supportive, and those things are working together. In addition, our instructional methodology is changing. How we think about student participation in the class. We've layered on culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning strategies so that we have not only the resource changing, but the instructional methods changing. That happened in addition to changing significant intervention resources. So we brought on more evidence-based and research-based interventions in reading and mathematics last year, which we recently had a board report on and looked at the effectiveness of each of those interventions over the course of this year. And then going into next year, we're going to continue with those better, stronger resources that we're utilizing, even adding on some from the same provider so that we can have a wider continuum of intervention resources with more interventionists. So we have more interventionists in math and reading, and they're allocated to buildings based on need. So as Mr. Ludloff stated, Ms. Senni and I looked at each student who needed intervention in math or reading, and whether that was Tier 2 or Tier 3 at every building across our district. Then we started planning for what would the level of staffing be for each building based on the number of students that have a need in each subject area and at each level of intensity. So when we look at the whole picture, we've changed our core resources and our core methodologies. We've changed our intervention resources and our intervention methodologies, and we've changed our staffing to support. At the junior high level specifically, we also have created more opportunities for intervention. So last year, our change to the junior high schedule allowed for the WIN period, what I need, where students could receive Tier 2 or Tier 3 reading, Tier 2 or Tier 3 math, depending on their need. But we know we have some students who have both reading and math needs. So going into next year, we also have interventionists allocated to provide during electives. So for certain students, we can choose to provide one intervention during WIN and one intervention during electives. So we're looking at it from all angles of our systems, our people, and our resources to make sure that we can take that multi-pronged approach and have various levels of intervention and instruction for students who need to close that gap quickly.
What about some other additional opportunities? Because I've extending the qualifications for students to, for example, go into summer programs or the tutoring opportunities that would be above and beyond. Maybe not a forced approach, but we can opt into it if you need help and you're willing to actually take it, right?
Yeah, so I know we have our summer program for which students who are shown in our data here they qualify for our summer programs, and we're participating in that. And then do we have our outside? I know obviously we have like our clubs and some academics, but Dr. Russell, do you want to share a little bit about what opportunities there are outside of the school day?
Sure. So one in particular that I can share about is Teen Reach, which we started last year at the junior high level. It is a program run after school. It's for about 3 hours every single day for the entire school year. And they specifically work with junior high students on a range of goals. They could be academic, behavioral, or attendance. They have extracurricular opportunities for them. There's time for tutoring during that time period. There's time for them to work on homework with support from the Kenneth Young Center staff. And there are also opportunities on days off of school where they're visiting museums or have other types of enrichment activities happening as well. So that's something new that we partnered with Kenneth Young on last year and have continued into this year that has been very successful.
And roughly how big is that program?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I know it's at each junior high
It's at
and
all
can
three
get that
junior
and
highs,
report
though.
out. It's
Yeah,
at all three
okay.
junior
and
highs.
Is
Yes.
it 6th through 8th, or is there like a
6th
targeted
through 8th.
range? Okay.
I also want to mention our AVID program, because I think that has been something that was implemented new this year to specifically target students who need that extra. And I know that it's very embedded within the win time and within the school day, but I think it also provides some of those outside of school opportunities to really give some students additional supports that they need to hopefully, start closing some of those gaps.
If I could share one additional thing about AVID. So for next school year for sixth grade, we are going to be starting out our school year with a school-wide approach to interdisciplinary strategies with a heavy focus on academic language. So our math curriculum and all math curriculum is very, very language heavy. And our new core resource in ELA with the foundational skills that it has in place around academic language is going to be a big impact across the board, as well as our AVID strategies around language development are going to be put in place. So that is a core strategy, interdisciplinary, seeing things in math, in social science, in English. We're going to begin in our sixth grade classes, and there's a lot of research behind that process. So we're going to see some shifts in the core as well, in addition to all the other intervention pieces that we have in place. And just, I know there was an update in our report on Friday, but this year, our summer school, we did expand. So we went from 300 students last summer to 615 on the first day of school. So we doubled our number of priority students this school year, which would be those exact students that you're seeing for our Summer Quest program. We're going to have our update next month for summer programming. We're going to talk a little bit about how that evolved and then talk about what are some summer opportunities and hear some conversation from the board on what research shows should be some of the opportunities we should be looking for moving forward.
Can I just, in terms of academic language, what are they learning?
So academic language would be like looking at our tier 1 words, our tier 2 words. So words in the discipline. So math language, math specific words, English specific words. So disciplinary literacy, which we haven't had across all of our core classes at the junior high. So that is going to be a big shift. And because we have our new literacy framework in place effective next year, we're building that into that. So that should help as well over time with that core.
I guess I want to echo Lucas's request then. I really would like to see where the interventionists are going and how they're being allocated. I think that would be really helpful for the board. And I know we can't intervene our way out of this. However, interventionists are so valuable, especially when you're doing that multi-pronged approach. There's research that if you're doing interventions in ideal circumstances, a student can make 19 weeks of academic gains over a school year. That's half a school year. Yeah. So I think that's an insanely important piece of this. And I don't want to let go of those kids who are in the junior highs right now, who are very much struggling.
And I would completely echo that sentiment. And I hope everybody knows that we are absolutely in alignment with that. We know that that's what we need to do now. Yes. Because it's a long-term solution down the road, but we have to fill the gaps today. Yeah. And how many new interventionists did we hire so far this year? Or do we have slated? How many of those positions?
Well, I can share that we will have 37 interventionist positions next year compared to 21 and a half this year before. So we can provide the amount of each type and what buildings they're at for the board. But I appreciate the questions because the amount of staffing, which came from the resource allocation presentation a few months ago, to the way we allocate that staff based on student assessment data and needs is a dramatic change for us and something we're very excited about.
Yeah, and I think as a district, we should be really proud that the board and our staff are incredibly supportive of the MTSS process. I mean, to dedicate those types of resources at that level is really something to be very proud of.
And I hope I didn't, share that I didn't think our interventionists were important or not. One of the reasons I wanted to include this slide is just to show, so much of this data is directly tied to the intervention work. And it's really a group that continues to grow and improve. So I think we all agree we need them and they're having an impact.
And quick question about the interventionists and resources. Do we track anywhere how many students were willing to do the extra work above and beyond in school, right? And how many were rejected from it?
Are you saying for
Could you go back?
Summer school, and if there's anything else outside of school, that'd be great.
Oh, okay. Yes, we can look at our prioritizing process for summer school and share some of that as well.
Thank you.
Not so low.
So say that again, I'm sorry. Did you have a question, Mardell, or a comment?
Oh, are you asking Mardell why the numbers at Claremont are so low?
Yeah.
So that's a good thing because these are students who are multiple grade levels behind. So they started the year with only 18% of their students 2 or more grade levels behind, and they ended the year with 4%.
4%.
So it's just really interesting to watch school to school where they're starting and where they're
Usually
ending.
Claremont and Bird are very close together and they're completely apart.
So what I would say to that, the question I would have is what's the difference about those schools? Programming, demographics, that's a driver. And those schools are different in how they're organized. All right, moving on to reading. So when we look at reading, very similar slide. Where did we start? Where are we now? Where do we compare to Illinois and the nation? As I said, this we're a little different from Illinois, but very aligned with the nation and made some good growth on the grade level side and moved kids again out of 3 and below, 3 or more, 2 or more across the board. So very consistent, but not that where we want to be historically. You know, I think to all those pieces, we all want to get back to that pre-pandemic time and get past that impact, and we're working towards that. So then we have the grade levels, same idea, fall, winter, spring, compared to last year, and then how we compare to the nation. And this is where you'll see there are some more where the nation's outpacing us, our grade levels. I think we're at 4 out of the 10, and the nation's ahead of us. My cohort group. In our schools.
When we compare the two, when we're looking at math versus reading, do you think a big factor of this comes into iReady being available in Spanish for the math piece?
It could have an impact if kids are more comfortable in the Spanish language, because math's about the curriculum, not about the language piece. That that definitely could have an impact. My biggest impression and why I'm so excited about the work we're doing in reading is, while we've strengthened the reading curriculum, we don't have that standardized across the board curriculum for reading yet, and we'll have that going forward. So we've made some great progress. Piecemeal is the wrong word, but having some great strategies, but not a consistent new that we can train into and plan into. That's pretty exciting going into this year.
Because in math, we're in year 2.
Going into year 3.
We're going into year 3.
Yep.
And then with the ELA, then we're going to be starting the baby steps of getting that going.
One thing that makes me happy is to see all 3 of our junior highs relatively close and they're
very consistent in their performance.
And I wish all of them could be up where Ridge is, because Ridge is obviously far and above everybody else for whatever reasons.
And the best way I look at this is, where do you start and where do you end? And that's some great progress for Ridge over the course of the year. But as I think Dr. Bresnahan said, all of our schools really made some great progress over the course of the year. And that's that same 2 and 3 below slide. In this one, 9 out of the 14 schools outperformed last year, and 13 out of the 14 showed pretty significant growth from fall to spring. Decreases, they're not growing here. We want it to go the other way. All right, final piece, growth. So another great part of the iReady piece is that it sets a target for kids. You come in the fall, here's where you're at. Here's what typical growth, like a year's growth, and here's that stretch growth to stretch you. And they have a ton of research based on those pieces. And that's where, if you have kids in the system, or if you don't, that's that pathway that kids can go into. So I get a pathway where I can work on the computer to try to improve my skills. And our kids do a great job of that process, and it really does have an impact. When we look at, this is math. Left-hand side group, that's typical growth. So compared to last year, we made some nice progress. All of our grade groups, whether it's on grade level to 3 years below, made at least 60% of the kids in those groups met their typical growth target this year. iReady tells us 50% is typical or expected. So we're there, we're above that. Then on the right is the stretch growth piece. That's that attainable, but I forgot the word. Katie, what's the word? Challenging.
Ambitious.
Ambitious,
But
but
attainable.
attainable. Challenging, same kind of idea. And you can see how that flows across those different groups. And this piece is our grade levels. On the left-hand side is typical last year to this year, and on the right-hand side is that cohort group. So as an example, we'll go 4th grade. Last year, 54%. This year, 63%. Our 3rd to 4th graders over here were 58% last year. This year, 63. That's how that flows across the system.
And can we just go back to that?
Yes, sir.
So this chart is telling me that our math scores are up and we're reaching our typical growth at a higher rate. So so if I think of last year, our math scores are up from the previous year. And now you're telling me this year, we also grew faster.
Continue to grow, yes.
Yes. But it's not just continue to grow, it's continue to grow above that average.
Yes.
That expected
So,
value.
yes, we want to be above that 50% target, our expected level. They have a ton of research. We meet with them after each benchmarking period of tying growth to proficiency and also to the kids in the path, and how they do in the path is tied to these pieces too. So basically, it's pretty simple. If kids practice and we have good instruction, it's a standards-based curriculum. They make
And year
progress.
over year, the program compounds on itself.
And you have a staff that really focuses and wants kids to do great. We're on a good piece. So this is the stretch growth piece. So you can see there's some pretty big variance between the different grade levels. On the left-hand side, that's the grade level groups, and then on the right is the cohort groups. But again, overall, some relatively consistent improvements across the board. That target, I'm sorry, and that target's 25% for stretch. So in their research, if 25% of the kids hit their stretch growth, that's expected. Obviously, you want it to be as high as possible, but that's based on their research. And these are our schools. A few into the 70s, most in the 60s, a few in the 50s. All above that target. Stretch. Target again is 25%. School didn't hit that target this year. All the others did. Some of them in the 40s. And that's just moving kids, even if they're behind, closer to that grade level. Stretch growth targets. And reading, we are in the home stretch. So again, here's what's interesting. I was trying to pull up the different slides. I believe actually the growth piece is higher on the reading side than it is on the math side. Shows, and our achievement is actually higher on the reading side than it is on the math side. We see some nice progress here in most of the areas in both typical growth and stretch growth. One thing I learned this year in working with the iReady people, I used to think on the stretch side that I wanted these numbers to be higher than these numbers. And what they've explained to us is this shows your tier 1 instruction is working because every kid is moving. We want more to move that are below grade level, but you don't want on grade level to be 10%, so we could be 30% for 3 or more behind. So this is an indicator that tier 1 instructional piece is having a positive impact.
You want to close gaps the correct way, right? Not by bringing the high group down. You want to bring the low group up. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why we want that strong tier 1 grade level expectation. So this is the typical. Sorry. So this one you can see not quite, we're about half, about 50%, a little less than 50% on the typical side for reading. Still above those targets, but not as consistent as we saw in math. Stretch, similar. Some variance there, some ahead, some falling, not showing the growth from one year to the next, or cohort group to the next. There are schools, all are above that 50% target. And the 14 showed some growth from the previous year. Here's our stretch. All but one, I believe. Oh no, I'm wrong. 9 out of 14 hit their stretch growth. Are improved from last year. I believe one did not hit the target. Rupley. That is it. Now, anyone want to guess how many data points there are in this presentation? 832. Of those 832, 701 improved over the course of the year. Yes, I think that
So
over 80%.
Let me ask a question on that. Obviously, work to be done.
Mhm.
Obviously, things to celebrate. Parents receive the iReady scores for their student, for their child. They see how they do. How does the district share this information when things go well, or when there's opportunities to put a spotlight on things that are going well?
So over these last few years, when we do this presentation, now there'll be a board report. Actually, both the presentation and the full report go out in that piece. And then what we also try to do is, and we're planning a special staff update for this week to just be able to share it directly out to all staff. And we've done that whether it's great data or it's not so great data, because this is system data. This is how the system is doing. Every school looks different, and the schools are systems, classrooms are systems. But how are we doing? Are we moving? Are we stagnant, or are we losing ground? Fortunately, these last few years, we're moving as a system, and those foundational pieces, as we continue to grow into them, have more intervention supports. We expect that to continue to move. If it doesn't, I will tell you, there's a few schools that consistently didn't make the progress some other schools. Their schools are already digging into that. What's the why behind that? One of the schools, and I had it in my notes and I failed to mention it, Frost lost a little ground in one area. Well, what was different about Frost this year? All the dual language kids from Devonshire moved to Frost, and the kindergarten moved to Frost. They had an impact likely on their reading scores. That makes sense. The second language learners reading, bringing a new group of kids, it's just changing schools is impactful. So those are the types of things. Is that a long-term thing, or is that a short-term thing that we can continue when we come back in the fall and see how that goes and see what all schools work on them plans around these pieces. Our shift, though, moving forward is this is summative data. This is after the fact. Now we're really working on the formative piece. The most important data is what happens in the classroom. I teach a lesson. How do my kids do? How do I adjust to meet those kids' needs? I'm the interventionist. I'm providing support to kids. Are they growing or not? If not, what supports do we provide them? That's where it gets done. This just measures that down the road.
So I'd like to connect a couple of comments that people have made, yours and yours and the others about interventionists. If I'm a parent and I say, well, my student didn't hit their stretch growth, why is this good data showing that the system is doing well? Why is that good for my kid? And the answer is because it lets teachers spend more time focused on the tier 1 students, and it gives interventionists a chance to become more effective. And so as the system as a whole is sort of righting itself, right, then resources become available to improve things for all kids.
For all kids.
Right. And so if you're, my kid didn't hit the growth I was hoping for this year, but the system as a whole is functioning better. So hopefully next year, your kid will be part of that group that surges forward. I could just say, you sent out this data as a rough draft, and I was so happy. I was dancing. I just want to take a minute to say that this shows 6 consecutive tests of growth. That doesn't happen without a huge amount of effort by the teachers and this entire leadership team, from the superintendent through the curriculum teams, through everybody, right? And including the ESPs, all the staff, everybody,
all part of the team,
all working together in the same direction. And so we've caught the state average in iReady. I expect we'll be getting real close in the IAR once
have
we
some
see
hopes.
that in
We have some
October.
hopes.
And I just want to point out, if we look at Illinois demographics, right? Illinois low income percentage is 47%. We're at 53%. Illinois English learners percentage is like 14%. We're at 46%. But we're catching up to them. So that shows that demographics is not destiny for our students, right?
Nicely said.
There's this thing in education where the assumption is the demographics drive your results. But I think we're showing we can push past that and we can deliver a high level of education for all students. And I think that's our challenge that we're putting for ourselves, because with this district, we're going to sink or swim on whether or not we catch up every group.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of times too, even when we rolled out the math curriculum, there were a lot of parents that were concerned that we were rushing into the decision. It wasn't vetted enough, you know, and it's working. It looks like it's working, you know. So it's figuring out. So much time is spent here, in my opinion, only of what's wrong, and obviously that's something we need to concentrate on. But when things are going right, let's figure out why it is going right. Let's champion why it's going right, and continue to celebrate those successes. That's what we should be doing as well.
Yeah, and well, one of the reasons we want to share with staff is we need that reinforcement. The progress, the effort, the things are happening. These comments are appreciated because it's hard work. It's hard work. Doesn't mean we're done at all.
Definitely very encouraging seeing improvement. And personally, I'm pretty sure curriculum drove a lot of it.
I agree.
Which is great that we got math and rolling out the reading. What can we do to get that rollout out? I mean, I'm not saying rushing into it, but we know we have multiple programs waiting. Some of it be accelerated. And now teachers are waiting and they want it, right?
I would say, from my perspective, over the last 2 years, watching these curriculum implementations of math, watching the pilots and review and study and selection process for ELA, while simultaneously also it's science, social studies in the works, art, music, PE, all also working. This is a teacher-driven process. It is going as fast as the system should handle. And I think that's really our success can be attributed to allowing ourselves the time and pace that we've chosen. I think we've pushed faster. Like you said, before I even first started, I was asked before July 1 if we should be approving the math materials or should we delay a year, because we were having a transition of leadership. And that question was posed, and we said, no, teachers need this now. Teachers were asking for it. We had to bypass some steps in that process, but fortunately, I think we were able to be really successful. I think now we've given the time and given the understanding, and the ELA process is so teacher-driven, and it is going to be the foundation of its success. I think it ties into all the things that we want for our staff to feel successful. Every teacher wants to do their job well. And I fear that if we pushed or rushed anything, that it would be met with some failures of some kind.
I'm saying doing some work in federal. Right?
And I think we are. Science, social studies, art, music, PE have also been simultaneously working with ELA at, world languages also, which will be adopted tonight. I mean, there have been so many, I don't want to speak for Susan, but I know how hard she's been coordinating all of this and through so much teacher leadership and teacher driven work. I think it's really commendable.
Yeah, the only content area by the end of next year that will not be fully complete is science. So every content area, including the electives, will have been revised or curriculum will have been adopted within a 3-year period. So science, my hope is that we will probably be bringing something to the board next summer. But social science is in the midst of it right now. So they'll probably end up with a complete, sort of like what we did with ELA, like a soft rollout in the middle of the year. Teachers will select something. that they're going to continue to work on it and we'll roll that out and then do the full implementation. I do want to share though that the ELA curriculum will propel that faster because that is the foundation that does support science and social science. So once we have that in, we have our scope and sequence, we have our learning targets, we have our practices, instructional practices, then that will allow that piece to go quicker. And we are already seeing it happen once we have that ELA piece in our scope and sequence being built out currently to be put in place for next year. So we are moving along simultaneously. Some of it we don't always share because it's just happening behind the scenes, but science is the one remaining one, but they are using a curriculum right now called STEM Scopes, and they have been working closely with our district leadership on building common assessments, understanding the standards. So even though they haven't piloted anything new yet, they have been working through that process, and they're going to begin a more formalized process in the fall. I hope that helps a little bit, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions too.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, 5.02, Human Resources Staffing Update.
Take this home with you.
Good evening. Just to quickly follow up on that interventionist conversation. So with our resource allocation approval, we added 13 additional interventionist positions for this, we can now say this school year, and 8 ESL resource positions. So I think the number I gave you was even not, when you add all interventionists, we have some district level, we have lit interventionists, math interventionists, there's over 35 positions, 20 ESL resource, we have 2 facilitators, 18 coaches. All together, that's a resource team of about 80 staff members, which is wonderful. To put that in some context, that's the size of 2 Juliet Lowe's. Our average staff size of about 40. And again, as we shared, the way we're allocating those resources is incredibly exciting because it's so student driven based on the need and the data. So with that, thank you for some time. Some questions came my way after the last board meeting because of the consent agenda. So I appreciate the opportunity to walk through some of those pieces. And one of the questions was about retention. The first piece to clarify, the question I was even, why are there so many resignations on the agenda? There were 32 times when the word resignation and retirement was on that agenda. But if you look on the left in the orange, we listed the reason why we were hiring some new individuals. So looking at just certified staff, there are some examples there, and you can see the bottom 2 positions, that was because of a resignation, not an actual resignation. So of the 37 or the 32 times that appeared to be the case, there were really only 15, and 9 of those were certified. So I wanted to clarify that. But I thought it was a terrific question because while the consent agenda is really not designed to communicate staffing moves, it's designed to document transactions with the board, but there's always room for improvement. So starting this month, and I welcome the board's feedback, you can see on the right, now we're listing in one table, here are all the new contracts. You can see the different groups. It's not 8 different tables. And then we'll have all of the departures. This month, it's just resignations and retirements. Next month, there could be a probationary. There are lots of different reasons. We'll have that organized in a clear way, but please send your feedback to me so I can continue to improve.
Yeah.
But with
You
that,
usually give us copies of these, don't you?
yes,
Yeah.
that is part of the board packet. That is correct.
Are the final, are those public for the public, like the actual HR report? That could on it, right? Yeah.
Yep.
These are fake. These are all fake names and fake.
Those are real names, but not all inclusive. I did some copying and pasting to make it fit on one
Okay.
slide as an example. But the question of, is there a teacher retention problem? There absolutely is a teacher retention issue across the nation. So I want to just bring some information to you, national level, local level, District 59. So I included a few resources here. In summary, it is something that we're not immune from. And the data and the research shares some of the reasons why teachers are reporting out nationwide. why they're leaving the profession. Not just leaving their position, but sometimes leaving the profession. Pandemic burnout, staff shortages. It was the what three industries? Hospitality, healthcare, and teachers. Most of the research said were the most impacted initially. Social media issues. Staff fearing that their name's going to show up on Facebook if something if there's a question, if there's an issue. Related politics, which when you watch the news, banning of books, different board votes that impact staff or programming. Work-life balance is something we hear about more often now post-pandemic. And other job opportunities. There are lots of other job opportunities, not just other teaching positions, but other industries that are hiring teachers to do work, which come with benefits that you can't have as a teacher, like working remotely, things like that.
Ross, I'm going off of, there's no data to back this up here, but the like in the corporate world, we always hear 5 years, then you move on. 5 years, you move on. Like you work 5 years in your position, then you look for something else. What's the average? Do we know length of stay here for employees?
I do not have that number off the top of my head. I will tell you, usually in the teaching, in my experience in District 59 and the teaching, you work towards the position you hope to have, whether that's a certain grade level, a certain program. And typically you can sit in that position for a long time.
Yep.
That's why if you taught something like physical education, where there's only one PE teacher in a school, there aren't as many openings for jobs. It's just like, wow, that person's going to sit there for a long time. Things are definitely changing in the education landscape. There are different rules to when you can receive a pension if you're coming out of school now. There are things called accelerated tenure, portable tenure, where a tenured teacher can now move to another district and potentially get tenure within 2 years. Those types of things are making it easier for the system to be a bit more fluid.
Yeah.
And I'll speak to a couple of those as well. But in terms of, okay, so that was the nation, but what does it look like in our area? This is ISB retention data, and they don't collect, the data is for last year, 22-23. That will start going in now. It's pulled from all of the school districts. So you can see some of the districts that I added to the chart since 2018-19, and our retention is still looking really strong. A couple things to note, I didn't really know this to this level until I started looking into this, is that ISBE collects this data based on teachers staying within their school. So with 80 resource positions, all those positions we added, and a lot of them filled with staff internally, they could be going to a different school, or they could be categorized as district-wide. So that could impact, I won't say negatively, but that could change, lower that number. But that would just cause us to then look at that more closely and say, why is that? Was it because we were moving staff around, or was it because staff were leaving the district? I just thought that was interesting, and I would share it. But the next table just also shows more Cook County, how the pandemic impacted teaching, unfilled positions. So you can go on the ISBE website, you can put in your county, you can put in even specific position types, and they'll tell you how many positions went unfilled. 2016-17, Illinois had 1,000. By 1920, it was up to almost 4,500. And it's interesting, it came back, and now look at 21-22, it's at 5,300. Cook County is performing a bit better, and you can see we're starting to rebound a little bit, but we had that same dip in 21-22. So that's just another indicator of, okay, there's national, then there's our area, and then this is very informal data. But there was a job fair through the HR Network group. It was a virtual job fair, which was fascinating because we were talking to potential students that were getting ready to graduate from their college campuses. We were connecting to people we never would have connected to when we simply visit some of our other local events. But they also shared out, since it was virtual, how many positions each district was looking to fill specifically. So we had 14 position types compared to some of our neighbors. Now, don't be accidentally misled by that number. Of our 14 position types, one could be a teacher position, and we're looking for 1,000 of them. So, but it was just, you're always trying to see, okay, what are some of the other data points? Are we the only ones here that have this many openings? So that's how we compare. But why did I pick those schools? It's not necessarily because of student data. We're going to shift gears now to candidates, people looking for jobs. And typically when they draw the circle around where they live, these are the areas that we're competing with for staff, more or less. And you can see it's quite interesting, I think, how different our districts can be from each other. From U46, which is goes through high school, but candidates are looking for those jobs, those third grade positions, just as they are for ours. 35,000 students. I mean, that is, I knew until I saw that number. 39% English learners. I included that percentage because that impacts the type of licensure we need for some of those positions. 2,200 teachers. District 54 Schaumburg, 28 schools. District 15, 19. There's our information. District 21, 25, and 57. So we're competing, but we are quite different in terms of size. And I just thought that was some good data to share. Now, what makes us unique? District 15, our closest comparable district is District 21, Wheeling, mostly Wheeling. You see they have Arlington Heights, unincorporated. You can see all the areas we serve. Almost the same amount of students. And again, this is 21, 22 relatively. Look at how many teachers, pretty similar. Now, we just added over 25 staff. Our number is going to go up. We have almost the same amount of students and teachers, and we have three more schools. That has a staffing impact because we need two additional nurses, three additional nurses, it changes things. You look at 25, where they have, what, about 700 less, maybe 650 less students. They have 9 schools. But their English learner percentage is different. So they don't need as many licensure components to hire their staff. So sometimes it's easy to compare because we drive through these areas as we're even just coming between home and some of the pretty different in the way we're either made up or in how we're structured, which has an impact on hiring and retention. So again, just fascinating. And then another piece, this is just review what makes us unique. Our enrollment has been going down. Our staffing has been going up. And we have great diversity in terms of our enrollment size. And we have great diversity in terms of our class size. And these are, you'll have access to this. The links will take you to presentations from the resource allocation. But those are definitely things that we have to consider when we're talking about retention. When we have a staff member who's excited to be hired for their third grade teaching job, but next year we need to move them into a fourth grade position because we don't have enough students, or we have to move them over 4 years into 3 different positions. That's instability is not necessarily ideal for retention. But again, it's something that we're addressing and observing and working on. So I just wanted to follow up with some of those questions that I was asked. I don't think District 59 specifically has a retention issue based on the information I've shared, although I do want to be very transparent that we are unique and some of our current structures do cause us to really be mindful of that when we're making some of the decisions, as we have been for the last couple of years.
No, I think it makes sense because I think people leave employment, whether it's school or in the corporate setting, for various reasons. They could be starting a family, they could start their own job, burnout. They could be tired of me talking all the time here on the board and say, I'm through with this board member and I'm done. But no, I think this data is helpful. Are you also seeing, my question though, is, are we seeing like a drop in, I don't even know if you can even track this, of students wanting to be like the college level, like the number of graduates of students?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I will say, I think I shared with the board, I was so pleasantly surprised when we went to the ISU job fair. They are still just doing an incredible job of, the amount of students we are able to meet. There have been other job fairs that we've gone to for dual language. We're looking year round. We have Dr. Perdomo and like traveling out of state. Sometimes there aren't people at these job fairs. That's starting to have a slight uptick. But some of the pandemic impacts on the workforce in general, let alone education, were absolutely very real. And I think too, as a longtime educator, sometimes we are separate than that part of the workforce because our conditions are just so different. But some of these, that work-life balance, that this is very new for everyone, but very new for us. It really, I think, took us out of our bubble a little bit.
Yeah. Because I can't admit, like, I try to put myself in the shoes of a teacher a lot here. And especially when you look at just like the national news, not just here in the district, but just nationally, of parents that want to dictate what is taught in the classroom and taking those, items away from the teacher. What books can be read, what books can be shared, what books can be in the library, etc. We don't have that here. But I could see it being a turnoff for a lot of aspiring younger teachers
Well,
today.
and the entire experience of going through the pandemic and closing schools, and I feel that there were shared observations of there were some benefits. We were able to connect in very different ways. I think some parents, because we were in lockdown, they you're helping their child get online. We're still using that as an option to meet with families during conferences if that's the only way they can get there. And we saw, I think, a lot of comments from communities of, oh my gosh, our teachers, this is incredible. But then it was challenging for communities to, get back. And that also created, some struggles as well. So I don't think we're fully out of the woods yet in terms of some of the our staff, especially if you're a new teacher, you have 4 years until you're pre-tenured. We recently are coming upon some of the staff who student taught during the pandemic, but they really didn't. It was virtual.
Right.
Some of the staff we hired via Zoom because we were in lockdown. It seems further away than it was, but we're going to feel that impact, much like our learners who now we're starting to see the data. It's starting to come around. Just to give you an extra bonus piece of data, of our postings, the top 3 position pools are for classroom teacher positions at the elementary level. Each of them has over 150 candidates. So we're still a destination district for many people, even individuals who are somewhere else and they want to work closer to home, which is us.
Sure.
So they're trying to come here from somewhere else. A little bit trickier to place individuals who have been teaching 15, 20 years somewhere else, but we're having those conversations and we're still getting big candidate pools. There are, of course, every district has some positions where it's a smaller pool and we're trying our best.
Because I was here at the time, but I don't remember a COVID like mass exodus of staff in response.
No.
The numbers were pretty constant, right?
Yeah, our district our staff was incredible. I think we probably had a small handful of individuals who absolutely needed to prioritize some things for themselves, but our staff continues to be there for us and our kids. But we are still adjusting. There is a change in education, not necessarily all bad, not necessarily all good. It's just a little different. We're adjusting. I know it'll find its way into future bargaining as it should. But please provide some feedback to me when you start seeing some of the new consent. Please remember that purpose of it is really to document those actions. When we do resource allocation reports, or like in the weekly, I'll put information about interventionists. There are other ways that we can make sure the board has what they need, so you have the understanding to vote on things that we bring your way.
Can I ask, is there a procedure in place for when you and your team realize that perhaps there's a significant portion of the staff from a given building that has left over a year or 2 years?
The HR team, the administrative team, if we see a trending data that there are staff departing from one building or program, absolutely, we review every departure. Every single person who leaves the district is invited to do an exit survey. They're invited to have a conversation with myself, their supervisor, or someone else that they would like to connect with. And then we're talking with that supervisor or the hiring manager to see what we can do. If there was any trend, whether it be a program or within a specific school, we would absolutely dig in more closely to see what is this next new program. Is this connected to staff that are within a certain amount of years experience? Was it the onboarding? It may not even be about that specific site or location. It could be about professional learning that we, didn't, meet our goal on. So absolutely. Any other questions?
Yeah. Do you guys have like a rotation, the SLT and you, Dr. Bresnahan, about like how often you go into the buildings, or like who goes into the buildings? You go weekly or monthly or once a quarter, or?
I'm trying to connect. I'm just trying to connect it to the discussion so I can try to provide some
I guess
information.
My connective thread is here. When you have staff leaving, I think that one of the things you have to consider are building policies and district policies, right? And I think the only way that you can kind of experience that from a teacher's point of view, and I appreciate all the stuff you brought in about national statistics, it is difficult to be a teacher, especially during these times. I just wonder then, there seems to me that there's a little bit of a chasm in terms of what I hear from teachers in terms of what they believe is working or not working in terms of policy in the district and the buildings, and what upper administration believes is working or not working in terms of policy in the buildings. So I'm just wondering, how can we bring those things together to create more staff satisfaction so that we aren't seeing those teachers who are incredibly connected to the district and maybe have been here 20 years, but then are dissatisfied with policy and would like to leave. You're right, people do have babies and they move, and I'm concerned about, and there's one on the list tonight who it pains me to see go.
Well, I think I appreciate the question, and I think I have enough understanding to respond to it. Of course, I can't speak to a specific personnel issue. I can share that we absolutely, I certainly didn't mean to sugarcoat that people resign. There are people who resign because they don't align with our vision. There are people who have shared with me in their exit interviews that they're leaving because they don't want to be a singleton in a dual language class. They don't want to have 36 kids in their class and there's 15 down the street. There are teachers who have left because they think kids should get detentions, and we don't give kids detentions. There's every reason under the sun. But to your earlier point, we look at that trend data. We look at all of the things that are impacting. There are teachers who will leave because of licensure changes. And we respect all of those different reasons, but we do have those healthy connections and channels through our building supervisors, through our department directly, through the association, to make sure the individuals on this consent agenda, I have clear understanding and have connected with. So to answer your question, I do feel we have avenues for people to reach out and share so that then we can internally look to see, is this a system issue? Is this a building issue? Is this a individual issue? Or, how do we make sure that we are taking care of our staff while we're taking care of our kids? Absolutely.
I hope this is not a silly question, but do any of you ever sub? Like once a year, go in the building and do sub like half a class or sub
for the purpose of
connecting with your staff and just making sure that the retention part is in place.
I guess I would be curious. I would want to review the data myself that shows what the disconnection issue is, so that I would be able to know if that would be the solution for it. I will say that our presence in buildings as SLT, I've worked in numerous districts. I've never seen a district level administrative team in buildings as often as we are, or as connected with our administrators. We connect with the association as a team monthly, and probably through different individuals daily. But I have not personally subbed in a class to feel better connected to the staff. No.
And Ross, if I could just jump in, because I think what's challenging is, we can always do better. We can always do more. We open up. I have teachers who invite me into their classrooms, and I come in and read and spend time with their class, and it's wonderful. I have teachers who come and tell me directly exactly how they feel. I have some who would never do that. So I think it's always working in partnerships with our people. It's a very large district with a lot of, over 1,000 employees. So I think our partnership with our DEA speaks very strongly to what we are prioritizing in terms of our connection with staff. I think the other piece that's really important is that we talk about staff as if they are one. They are as diverse as the 7 of you. And I think that it's really hard to not get sucked into like a Yelp mentality that we're going to look at Yelp reviews, right? Because it's going to be either the super positives who perhaps, like work for the company or something, or the people who are really, really dissatisfied. And it's very, very hard to really get a general sense of everyone else that falls in between. So I think collectively, I think our principals are so closely connected to us and being conduits in how do we open up those doors for communication. I think being present, I know meeting with staff, I can just attest to the amount of time that people are connecting and meeting with staff. I feel the same way about our parents and being able to, if we just did it based on voices that were at our board meetings, that would be a very, very small percentage of people that are invested in our community. So the work ahead of us and the challenge is having enough consistency and continuity so that we can build those connections. Turnover is real. And when we say staff, I want administration too. When we have turnovers in some of our buildings of 4 principals in 4 years, that has an impact on the staff as much as on the leadership team. So I think these are all things that we talk about and work on a daily basis. And our connection with the DEA, I think, it's something that we prioritize, and getting that satisfaction data back from a broad scope of people, because you're right. I could have one person that's going to tell me, I don't like this policy or procedure, and I don't want to teach here anymore. And I could have 5 more that say, no, I totally disagree. And we have to come together, just as the 7 of you, to collectively make decisions in the best interest of our students. So it's duly noted. It is very much appreciated and in the feedback. I think HR does an outstanding job of opening doors and pathways for people to communicate. That's what we've really tried to do, is be open to hearing. But that doesn't mean we can give everybody what they want, nor can all of you do that, right, to every family. So I appreciate that. I think we need to be better at communicating the things that we are doing and opening doors for a greater diversity of voice to be present at the decision-making table.
No, I agree. I think our role here as board members, and what I do not want to do and what we should not be doing, is analyzing every exit interview that happens at the building level. That's not our role as a board. So when I see letters or I see the HR report, there's a process in place, like you said, that you review the exit interviews and you discuss that. And if there are trends, you investigate those trends, or I hope you do, investigating those trends to see what needs to be improved or what needs to be fixed at the building level, et cetera. That's I don't think is a role for us here as a school board. We can set the policy, but we shouldn't be, like I said, analyzing every exit interview that comes through.
But it's not about every exit interview. It's about identifying trends. That's also what we've been talking about before.
Yeah. So to clarify, Lucas and I met with Mr. Vittori and Dr. Bresnahan before, and we discussed what would make sense in terms of data instead of anecdotes to come to the board as a way to monitor this sort of thing, and even work with the DA on possible staff satisfaction. So we wouldn't necessarily be looking at everything, but we could potentially see those trends. And I think at sort of a executive data level, and kind of like how we do the benchmarks constantly, we could do some sort of staff satisfaction thing that we could then review every year and get a sense of trends over time.
Yeah, I think the importance, we're going to experiment and see if we can find a tool that can be shared with the board, whether it's through a board update or just that gives, especially before big decisions such as resource allocation. Because if of the diversity of our 1,000 staff, if I had to summarize one word that I hear from staff when I am out connecting with staff, it's stability. That's what we want, is stability. And I get that, but that is really tricky then when we're going, okay, this is what'll fix that chart. Let's get another curriculum. Let's get 5 more people. Like, those are good solutions, but everything is connected to everything. And then that like slow and steady or balance or whatever phrase, go slow to go fast. That's why I think that student voice that has been such a part of our curriculum work is vital. Our partnership with the association has been vital. But I'm hoping that this data we can work on together gives you what you need to know, so that when we are talking about solutions over here, then we can at least go, hey, wait a minute, quick question. Would that go against this here? So we can really align all those arrows to maximize our efforts as we move forward.
And that is the reason why I'm hoping we can expedite getting that data, getting that better
Yes.
level view, because it would definitely put in perspective those few rumors, or whispers that we hear here and there. I mean, because at this point, I'm thinking there are buildings out there where 90% of staff is dissatisfied. Is this true? I don't know, but for me, it brings the red flag and a concern. That's why we need to expedite it, and in order to put the board and the community at ease.
And it'll take a few iterations for us to give feedback to kind of shake out what that looks like in terms of board level reporting.
Yeah, and staff satisfaction is one part of that. Staffing trends are a different part. It's July.
And we talked about
There's different timeframes within the natural course of a school year.
and we talked about a little bit of stuff that maybe like that raw retention number might not capture internal transfers or stuff like that.
Absolutely. And consent agendas can be very tricky, because you can see one name could be on 3 different consent agendas, and
more importantly, from the board's perspective, they're so variable because they could be bigger or smaller depending on like when we have a meeting. And I would like to see that figure out a way to smooth that data out and get a more representative value for the whole year or half year or whatever it is. Again, it'll be an iterative process. I think the board's receptive to trying to find a way to bring that into our oversight data set.
Excellent.
All right. If there's no more questions while you're there, FOIA.
The board responded to 4 FOIA reports since the last report to the board. Thank you, Dr. Sager.
Thank you.
That was the presentation we were waiting for, right there.
That moves us on to the consent agenda. And if somebody can give us a motion, I just want to point out our prior press policies are on here, right?
606.
Yeah. So that's the 111, not the one we reviewed in policy today. Yeah. So does anybody want to make a motion?
Could I bring up something?
Do you want to discuss something on the consent agenda, or
No.
what's it in regards to?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda. If you'd like me to do that, I can do that.
Okay. We have a second on the consent agenda? Well,
Second.
does anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda? Any discussion on the consent agenda? All right. So if not, Daisy, go ahead. Roll call.
Roll call. Okay. Zach.
Aye.
Espino, aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Mancia.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes.
Okay. Now, did you have a question related to something else on the agenda, or?
Yeah. What's on my mind tonight is I've been doing a lot of research and so forth at home on all my legacy paperwork from District 59, and I brought some of it along tonight to show some of you. I think it's very important that each of us as a board member should be available to anybody in our district who is interested in talking to us. And because I've lived in my house for so many years and so many people know me, I have people coming who I have no idea who they are, who want to come and talk to me. But in the meantime, I've saved too many things. And I've been trying to go through some of them. And I brought a couple of them along tonight. I thought I'd just pass them out and let you look at them and not keep them. But one of the things is the retirement party from Superintendent Fay, who was the superintendent about 40 years ago when I came on the board. And so there's pictures here that I thought you might be interested in looking at. And then there's also one here with Dr. Schweers, who was your predecessor, and Barbara Samaji and I, board members, and
No, I know that guy.
you know that guy, his
Yeah.
father, the mayor of Elk Grove Village. And so I thought you might like to look at that. And this is the program from Jim Fay's retirement party. And his party was wonderful, and I thought you'd just like to look at it. So pass it around and everybody look at it and let it get back to me eventually.
Right.
I am not going to pass out any of this other stuff that I've got, but I have decided I cannot keep 40 years worth of papers any longer. So I'm going to make packages and bring them and give them to you. You can take them home and look at them and throw them out because I can't keep it all. And maybe you'll find something interesting and maybe you won't, but it's worth a try. And I think it's good for you to learn what went on 30 years ago and 40 years ago and so forth, because our school district has always been good. And we had many, many more schools at one time. We had 21 schools. We were a much bigger district. So things were different than they are now.
Okay.
So I'm just like to share.
Great. Thank you for
Thanks,
that.
Thank you,
And
Margo.
it's nice for us to get it. Before you throw it out, give us a
I'll give it
pass
to
at
you
it,
guys
right?
first, and
Let's go
then
to,
pass it back.
Okay, 7.0, we've got 3 action items. So the
For you
first
to
is
look at.
7.01, approval of the e-learning plan renewal, which we discussed last time.
I'll make the motion. Be it resolved on the 10th day of July 2023, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education adopts the proposed e-learning plan.
And I'll second. So roll call, please.
Espino, I. Johnson.
Aye.
Mantilla.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
And Zach.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, 7.02, World Language Program Curriculum.
I'll make the motion again. Did you want that one?
No, good.
No. I need a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Whereas the Board of Education discussed the world language curricular resources on the 12th day of June 2023, be it resolved that on the 10th day of July 2023, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education purchased the following world language curricular resources for grades 6 through 8, effective for the 2023-2024 school year as set forth in this motion.
Ms. Espino seconds, so roll call, please.
Okay, Johnson.
Aye.
Mantilla.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Chesney.
Although I'd just like to comment, I think that we probably should research this a little bit more before we choose it as.
Oh, this has been reviewed and piloted by the language teachers, and we've had a presentation on it. It's been coming for
Piloted by a number of schools?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Zach.
Aye.
Espino, I. Okay, motion passes.
Yeah, and while we're at it, I'd really like to thank the pilot teachers. That I know it's a lot of extra work, but it's really important stuff. So thank you. Okay, 7.03. So this is an amendment to begin our regular meetings at 6:30 if we have a closed session before the meeting. So we had discussed the possibility of doing that. We would have to modify our calendar just to say that our meetings can begin at 6:30 if we have a closed session. It's just a formality as long as everybody's okay with that still, right? I think we have discussed this a bunch of times. We will always have in reserve a closed session afterwards in case if we did have a closed session that went too long, because we technically have to start the open part of the meeting at 7 no matter what. Then we could come back and go back into closed session later. This is just sort of holding a spot if we had lawyers or somebody sitting around. We don't want them to wait. We would rather do the closed session beforehand.
Just
Yeah.
like, what would the order be? So people who want to come and give comments or actually observe.
So
we do-
the closed session would begin at 6:30. It would be roll call, pledge of allegiance, immediate vote into closed session. And then at 7 o'clock, we would be forced to come out of closed session. If we finished the closed session early, we would recess until 7.
Mhm. So then procedure, like the actual, like procedural wise, we're all going to be here in the same room. We're going to do everything you just said. Everyone that is here to speak or to see the board meeting, presentations, the whole works will wait until we open the doors again to come back inside.
Or we could potentially use another room.
Or we go somewhere else to do
We
it.
can in the closed session. So like if we have students preparing a
Yeah.
presentation, we can go into a different room.
Yeah,
the
that's what I was
bathroom,
gonna
for a
ask.
closed session only.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And we
It-
sometimes we need a closed section at the end because something has come up.
Right. And,
Right.
and so we will always, on every agenda, we will still put that placeholder closed session. We'll just
Emergencies
opt
type.
not to do it most of the time.
Mhm.
And I think this would be most useful when we have things like negotiations, regular updates, that sort of thing, where we know we're going to have a closed session
Yep.
beforehand.
I also think it might be wise to consider that we try this for 2, 3, 4.
And if it's
And
if there's
if
an
it
issue, we
doesn't
can
work,
tweak it
we
later.
can always
Yeah.
change it.
There's just a ruling that says we have to change it 10 days before we do any meetings. So if we
Because
change it now,
isn't
we're good for our
really-
next
Yeah.
meeting.
If it isn't really helping us to get the meetings better, then there's no point in changing it.
Yeah, I hope we'll make it. So I don't mind making this motion as everybody's good with it. Be it resolved on the 10th day of July, 2023, the District 59 Board of Education hereby determines the Board of Education meetings will start with closed session at 6:30 PM, followed by open session at 7 PM.
Mhm.
A list of meeting dates reflecting this update is attached to this resolution, and it's
Mhm.
the same dates,
Sure.
just with that caveat that we may begin early.
Mhm.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Question.
Sure.
How will we know when there is a closed session at 6:30? Because
It will be posted on the agenda.
So
We
like-
have to post on the agenda if we had that, we would have to post an agenda that showed a closed session at 6:30 and a closed session
I
at
see.
the end.
Because like, for instance, today there was a closed session on the agenda, but there is not a closed session tonight?
Do we have a closed session?
For the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will always be there.
It's,
Okay.
it's just always.
It's always
yeah,
there. So
it's
the
always there,
placeholder.
and the board has the option to.
So we will see closed session up front at the top of
Yeah,
the agenda.
the 6:31
Makes
will be on or off depending on if we need it,
Mhm.
and the one at the end will always
Always
be
be
there,
there.
and then we can choose in
Yeah.
the meeting
Okay.
if we need it or not.
Sure. Makes
All
sense.
of this is compliance issue stuff.
Yep.
For the Open Meetings Act. No. I very carefully checked the state's attorney's rules and went through special training to make
Okay.
sure we followed everything
Okay.
correct.
That makes sense.
Okay, did somebody second?
Yeah,
missed it.
I did.
All right, roll call, please.
Okay. Mancia.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Chesney.
Aye.
Zach.
Aye.
Espino. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Okay. So
Okay, that moves us on to 8.01, discussion items, 23-24, tentative budget and long-term financial plan.
Board of Education, Dr. Bresnahan, good to see you all.
Hello. All right. Yeah, thank you. I put it in PDF here, and I'm sure it looks lousy. However, just as a reminder, so this is the 23-24 budget, and it is a living, breathing document. So this is only the parameters, the beginning of it. We're not going to be approving it anytime soon, but I'd like to give the update, and so that we can make sure that everybody has several looks at it. It's actually been in front of the district office for the last, actually since July 1st. So here is your typical calendar for the major dates that we follow. Our staff does coordinate with the business office. We relay needs to each other. We help with the respective departments. So you talk about, for example, curriculum, right? So Ms. Savage then and I will have a meeting. We'll discuss how we're going to budget it, how it's going to look over the next couple of years. And we try and do that as much as we can with all departments. So you see that we reviewed this budget today. On the 7th of August, I will go over any additional changes that may have happened in advance. There's already like one or two things I would like to look at. We hope to adopt the final budget September 11th because it has to be submitted to ISB, State Board of Education, by October 31st. Unfortunately, ISB allows us to do our budget even though we're already in the budget year. Sense, but we're good. So if you scroll down to the areas of focus, Some of this that really came up, and I know we've seen these tiles before, the access to programming, class sizes, the demographics, enrollment, facility and capacity to usage. These are the 8 tiles that we have mentioned. Transportation is going to be one that we're really going to discuss shortly. But it's supposed to support us. It's support for every child. So that's just kind of where we're at with this one. So here's where the fun stuff begins. So here's our board policy that we look at. So 425 is a fund balance policy. So operating funds are what funds you need in order to run a school. If you don't have these funds, you can't run a school. And then the state comes in and takes you over. So our fund balance policy is we should be no less than the 50 to 60% range of operating funds in the event that something were to happen. So if you look at our projected funds for the end of fiscal year 23, we're looking at a fund balance of 118,000 or million, sorry, 700. Now we know why this has a problem. 118,794,912. So that's for every one of our funds. For our budget for our expenses for next year, we're looking at a little bit over $140 million, which is our current operating fund balance. When you look at just operating, we have about 81% of our reserves covered, which means that, let's just say we receive no money from federal, state, or local. We can survive off of for 81% of the year, which is a lot.
So in simple math, we're gonna, like, I always put it in like simple terms of we're expecting to spend $140 at the grocery store, but the law says we have to have at least $70 on our credit card or something like that. And
Right.
we have actually $80, or, you know, something. Yeah.
Correct. And our district is above what the state is looking at.
But that does vary throughout the year, right? Because there will be times where we'll have output expenditures, but not yet received revenues, right?
Correct. Plus, it can change significantly. So, for example, our operating fund balance last year was about 90%, but it wasn't because we've lost money for that matter. It's because of how much money you budget into that operating fund. So, for example, you'll see the ed fund. We've budgeted extremely well in. We have some, we have staffing, we have any sort of curriculum. We've really done a lot of due diligence with that, so that we made sure the dollars do go straight to the classroom. So that's why you'll see it at 81% this year.
Is there, I thought I saw somewhere there's a new rule where you can't have too much money. Is that?
Mr. Johnson, yeah. Unfortunately, that is a rule. There are state legislators right now that are trying to push any 2.5 times whatever you'd have in operating funds. If you have 2.5 times what it would take for you to run for a year, then you actually have to make a reduction plan in your funding. I'm at the kids' table now. So that's kind of how it is. You know, that's what they've been pushing for it.
So we're nowhere. We'd have to have over 300 million for that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, there is one district nearby in particular, and they're not happy because now they have to figure out what are they going to do. So. So here's some of the examples of the revenue sources that we have at the local, state, and federal level. One of the big ones that I'd like you guys to look at is the local. The second piece, which is the corporate personal property replacement taxes. On any, and you'll see this in our presentation, on any given year, the district receives $4 to $5 million from that. So what it was a law back in like 1978-ish, 79, where the state decided we're not going to decide how businesses have to spend their money or give tax dollars. Instead, it's going to be based on a combination of things, such as how well that business is doing. So it's typically $4 to $5 million. What we've seen is that ESSER dollars went to businesses. They spent those ESSER dollars, and now those dollars are funneling down to us for this year to the tune of about $16 million. That's a big jump. That's a one-time thing. So I'm just warning us in advance as we walk through this, but it's a good problem. Some of the other pieces we'll talk about are the property taxes, which have been fantastic for the local residents. Preschool for all, that's a big one at the state level, focusing on serving the most at-risk children. And then the IDEA, any sort of early intervention in special education. So here's some interesting revenue highlights and assumptions. Just so everyone is aware, the state splits each district into, there's 4 tiers. So tier 1 means you are among the most poorest districts in terms of local revenues per pupil. We're tier 4, so we are at the top, and that just happened recently. The other thing that that we can consider is, in the past, Cook County did have its tax issues. It doesn't look like it's going to be that case this year. The other interesting piece here is that you see the consumer price index. The way that the levy works, and we're going to have a lot of fun when we talk about that in the financials, is that you take the December consumer price index from the prior year, and you find out that's kind of your aim for what you're going to look at for taxes, right? It's 6.5% this year. It doesn't mean that we get 6.5% though, but it gives you an indication for how much money we're going to end up spending, because companies are going to increase whatever at some point. We did talk about the corporate personal property replacement taxes, which we say CPPRTs. Keep in mind too, we have waived school fees now. This, I think, the 3rd or the 4th year. And we've had interest earnings increase. We've eclipsed $2 million in that just recently. So that's actually, it's been a phenomenal move. The last, oh wait, actually next slide, please. So we talked about tier 4. And then, of course, federal revenues. We always keep them flat until the actual dollars are approved. So on March 9th, I guess, President Biden released the President's fiscal year 2024 budget, which includes $90 billion for the Department of Education, which is a 13.6% increase. Now, do you think it's going to happen? You know, things may work out, but just an FYI that's been put on our radar. As for the Illinois General Assembly, every year they've been putting in $350 million into the school funding formula, and it's been pretty much known that it's not enough. It still needs to accelerate. That's not going to happen though, the way things are going in Springfield. And then the other piece is the categorical grants. The one you're going to see that gives us the most issues is transportation. They prorate it. They don't give you the full amount. And then when we budget for it, we have to look at the prior year. When you apply for the prior year, you end up, they look at the mileage and everything else, and then they give you a certain percentage of that. So let's just say hypothetically, there weren't a lot of bus drivers or routes got cut. Well, then you're not going to get much, even though we were projected to do more in routes. So keep that in mind when we look at the transportation piece. Also, revenue sources. It is eventually it's property taxes being about 70% in this mold, but it's 82 total. It's probably even more at this point. The industrial parks in Elk Grove have done a fantastic job for the EAV for the district. But this is just kind of how much money we do bring in.
What's an example of evidence-based?
Evidence-based funding is the state funding formula.
State funding formula?
Yeah, so that's where they give them the $350 million into this whole pot. Our district will probably see an increase of, I would say, 5 figures. So maybe like $60,000 or $70,000. We receive about a little over $12 million from the state in a year.
The goal of that is to fund districts, mostly downstate, where they don't have a large local revenue base, but to bring them up to the standard of everybody getting the same amount.
So I was in Cicero-Berwyn before this, and we received $43 million from the state. And then when evidence-based kicked in, it went up to $64 million in 1 year. And it was a reallocation. They were trying to move the money, just like what Dr. Sager said, into districts that are more in need of it based on what the state thought. This was mentioned earlier, and this is a commercial, industrial versus residential piece with our district. It's very unique. There aren't many places that have anything like this. So if you look at our EAV from fiscal year 11, it's still kind of, it's pretty consistent, right? So 38.7% of residential of dollars from local taxes come from residential. As of last fiscal year 21, it's 36%. Whereas commercial industrial really do carry the district with its local funding, which was the reason why our district has the lowest tax rate in the area. And we'll see that in the next couple months when we talk about that piece. It's actually inverse of what Cook County does, which is typical. So it's a blessing for us to have that in our backyard.
Industrial is basically Elk Grove's big industry.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you look at the expense categories, it's other pieces. I think it's pretty straightforward. Salaries are the big thing, and benefits as well. We've seen some increases in those. Purchase services, we're expecting increases due to inflation as well as supplies, but we'll go through that in a few. So the expense highlights of what we try to keep up with. Of course, it's we look at the increases based on the negotiated agreements, the retirements and resignations, they're in there, as well as the resource allocation. We take that information into consideration, of course. The benefits were actually a bit higher than we expected this past year, but it's still low for many areas in any district in the area. Our medical PPO saw a 6.6% increase. In the medical HMO went up 5%. Dental went up 7% because they called it, people didn't go see the dentist during COVID, and I guess they're doing it now. Now they're getting crowns or whatever, much like me. TRS at the state level, that's been 9%. It's been flat for a while. And then the federal, what happens if you use federal dollars on a teacher, the state charges you more for that through a federal, like their TRS, which is 10.6%, which is far less than over 50% that we saw years ago. As for other highlights, food service went up 6.5%, which was at CPI. Other purchase services, we look at operations, of course. 2 curriculum adoptions right here, world languages and social studies. Of note, talking to Ms. Savage again with this, those curriculum that we're talking about, they're going to be the one-time charge for 6 years, which means you don't have to worry about that purchase for the next 6 years. And yet your teachers receive the curriculum, they can work with it, they get to know it. So that's a great thing. The other thing we did was field trip costs. Normally buildings would have to budget for that. And we worked together on that one to make sure with SLT that that is now a cost that the district absorbs. So kids should not have to pay for that. So that was another $120,000.
Well, not only kids, but PTOs that's a large expense that PTOs output, and we'd rather they spend it on fun things in the building than field trips.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the expansion of the music programs, Dr. Bresnahan has been I almost said instrumental in increasing those. I didn't mean it that okay, but in our art programs as well, we've done a lot of good with that to the tune of I have to think about when they've had the music teachers had to put together a letter to our staff asking for items, and it was a no-brainer. They want the best for our kids. It's really cool to see, especially the ukuleles. That was a big piece of it. And then supplemental instructional materials. We're going to keep doing that. That is no doubt. It's all about our kids. As for operations and maintenance, we're looking at purchasing 2 maintenance vehicles. We try and change them out just to make sure that they are top of the line and we don't have to worry about fixing them over time. As for transportation, our contract now with Safeway has been it's been nice because it guarantees us 4% increase per year in the next couple of years. They already are settling in. This is the first time ever that we've had our smaller buses that have cover over them, as well as they have another facility that they've already put together. So that you'll be seeing an update with that soon. Our debt service fund, we have 2 bonds that retired, and now we have 1 more in 2028. And then once that's done, there will be no debt services to the district. As for IMRF and Social Security, that number fluctuates with the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. And then our capital projects, I admit, it's a little ambitious there. It says $8 million. That's one of the numbers I really want to look into to kind of nail down, because that is a lot of money. And we need to make sure that it's going in the right spot.
I agree. That one stuck out in my mind too.
Hey,
I
Ron,
think
with the 8 million,
I think it's too high.
That's all part of like the maintenance plan, right? So like for instance, last year, if you know offhand, how close were we to that target and what was projected versus what we spent?
We were pretty much spot on, except for some of the payments happened from FY22 coming into 23. So we were off because of that. Otherwise, we were in great shape.
And even if I remember right, a lot of the bids that we had would not increase. So we were paying like a fee, and in the event of change orders or anything like that, that would have come up.
Correct. And if there was a change order, that would come to the board anyways. Capital projects wise, we're in great shape. And you guys have seen some of the windows. There's more wonderful things that we're doing with that. But again, there's only so much money to go around. So.
And of course, this is the plan to replace and maintain these things, so we're not getting the unexpected roof that needs to be replaced.
I'll say this straight up. I've never been in a place with 15 buildings that you had to replace all 15 roofs at one point.
Yeah.
And we already did it.
Yeah.
So our roofs are good. But it was 2 years. That's a lot of work in 2 years. As for bond payments, here's what it would look like, what it does look like until March 1st of 2028. I'll have that date in my phone and the alarm will go off. At that time, we will be done with those payments for those bonds. But to me, it's always something for the board to see because, I mean, this is the reality.
So each one of those, we're paying 3.815 on, or 4.4, I guess it is when you have the interest in. That payment we make on March 1st.
Right.
And then again, we make another $4.5 million payment. Got it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Mr. Johnson, you see even September 1st, we even have to pay the interest without hitting principal according to these bonds. The bonds are what they call non-callable, which means we can't pay them in advance. So it's kind of where we're stuck at. However, that has helped us with our investment money, and that's why we're receiving more dollars with our investments, is because we've bought other districts' bonds, and then they're stuck and they can't get out of paying, into their, the structure.
And we've been paying these as what, 2019? I can't remember what the.
That was just before my time.
Before my time.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm done.
Did you get that answer?
I don't think we know. But I think
it was March of 2020. It was
Something
just
like
before.
that.
It was with Vicky. So it was.
I lost my question. We'll come back. Oh, for already approved was the levy for the 23-24 fiscal year?
No.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Got it.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that.
Okay.
A bunch.
So something that I would consider is using some of those excess funds to pay these down, or I don't know how you assign it, but we have that money there. I don't know what rainy day we're keeping it for, but in my opinion, I would say to avoid, I think you're going to by saying 6.5% increase in cost of living. This is not quite 6.5%. Maybe it's like 2 or 3%, but by doing that, we could keep that lower.
Yeah, we could absolutely talk and look at the data per household, how much it would save. We can do all that numbers. I actually have a spreadsheet for that already.
I think that's something to come up in facilities and finance as a possible use of that money to think about parking it in there to pay off the debt. Kind of. It's not paying it off. It's reducing our request.
Well,
not reducing, not asking for as big of an increase. However you want to phrase that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, here's some of the things that we're going to be buying anyways. If you see it, the capital projects here, this is money that we already have. So this isn't really anything that, you know, but the one thing we can say with the capital projects fund is that that is not money that we've taken from bonds since I've been here. We've made sure to take whatever excess we've had, put it in the 60 fund so that education, curriculum, everything else can continue running smoothly and that we don't go to the taxpayer for bonds. That's been like something I've focused on and saying that can't happen. And I know that our SLT is the same way. At the same time, we do have the money to do this. There's main water booster pumps. There was a flood, you had to recall, with Holmes a couple of years ago. That was a travesty because it ruined a lot of things, and we had to go and start looking at all of our other facilities, seeing the piping. Notice that the booster pumps to push the water back and forth weren't always up to speed. Fire panel replacements, so making sure that the fire alarms are all set up. That's another thing we've been looking into. It's part of our 10-year plan. Flooring, playground maintenance, the fact that our district can sustain and spend on like a beautiful playground for our kids it's the envy of a lot of districts. And we're going to continue doing that. There's going to be, believe 1 or 2 more schools we're going to be working on next year, and we're just going to keep knocking them down. Seal coating, sanitary lines. Our PA systems will be up to speed in every single building at the end of this year, which relates to safety. Our window replacement, we're going to continue as well. That goes with safety.
That's on a regular basis in every building, correct?
Correct, yeah. And in fact, after this year, PA systems will be completely done. Mill and overlay and roofing, we're just doing some minor tweaks. But in terms of our facilities, and if you go to other districts in the area, you look at our everything that's going on in our parking lots and everything else, we're on top. And I can confidently say that. So if you look at the expenses, here we go. It's mostly salaries and benefits. We're looking, almost 70% there. Purchase services, it's about 12.4%. That can involve contractual pieces, and that's why you do see a larger number sometimes. But the district is just like anybody else, with the biggest drivers being on staffing. So here's the slide that people want to see. Overall, you have an operating budget right now is in the positive, just operating, which is the important piece that the state looks at, of $872,190. And I'm sure it'll be even more. Because the problem is here, if you see the transportation piece, this is assuming that we have to budget for every route. We can't just say, oh, we're going to cut things through, because you never know what's going to happen. You have to expect that, right? The state, since we haven't been going through all of our routes and with driver shortages and everything else happening, we were shorted. Not because it was their fault necessarily, even though they do cut back in the percentages and they prorate it, but we didn't use transportation as much as we could have because we didn't have the drivers. So that's why you see that. So as a result, tax dollars from all the municipalities have to pay to make up that amount. We do have a good fund balance with that, but a negative $2.4 million difference is nothing to scoff at if it's just going to keep adding up.
Sorry, one more question. So
yeah,
if we haven't given the levy yet, what number are you using for revenues? Last year's levy?
Yes. And then I'm also planning for 77% of the levy coming up is going to be probably about 5%. So that's when I know that the revenues will probably increase by 5%. And then that's when I'll use it as a placeholder for now.
So you're using as a placeholder revenue 5% above what last year was.
Correct. And then that's what happened with the prior year as well, when it was 7%. But the other piece to consider is that we do have, and you'll see the transportation, we're almost at 100% fund balance just for that one fund. Every fund, it's just like having a different account, right? That money would just come out of there as well.
And while we're on transportation, with the new contract, we expect to be closer in line than this, right? Because there's that lag when the state pays us the next year. We expect to be closer.
I do, but again, the expenses are based on all of the routes that we're budgeted for, right?
Okay.
That we're anticipated to be run. It's like, so no one could have imagined that we were going to be running 13, 14 routes short in the prior year. That's going to save you some money, whether it's good or bad. And that's essentially kind of what happened. So in order to look at the fund balance, sorry, I don't want to blind anybody. Okay, I don't know how to work this thing. This is like the worst budget presentation I've ever had. Okay, there we go. All right, so if you look at it, that FY20 piece right here, very top, that was the health, life, safety bond that was taken out by the district. If you don't count that, the revenues have just gone up. If you see what I'm saying, especially the fund balance, we've been trying to work with the ed fund. Every other account is about 100% fund balance. Ed fund, not so much just yet, but that's that's about over $100 million. So that's something to think about. The other thing to think about here is that the certain funding will be going away, such as when we talk about the CPPRT dollars that are going to be a one-time shot, or ESSER dollars too. Mm-hmm. Those were very beneficial in supporting whatever we needed to purchase at that time. So if you look at the operational fund balance, it's incredible just how our district has been. Back in 2018, the district did do a little bit of deficit spending, which means that it went down to $100 million in its fund balance. Then things turned for the positive, and our revenues have consistently been strong compared to our expenses. And FY22 there is still, it was, yeah, I mean, just because we did receive so many dollars. Some of those were savings because of, again, with COVID, but we still had to make sure that the dollars were put in the right spot. And in the meantime, we did take some of those funds and put them in that 60 fund. The 60 fund's the saving fund. You'll hear me say this a lot, where it allows us to do like the vestibule work, the window work, a lot of the safety work, architect work, stuff that we don't really necessarily want to think about, but we have to. So the district has been doing well with this. Again, that's why we haven't taken out a bond. But then if you look at the next slide, the predictions are here. Here's a financial summary. After these years, you've seen the revenue amount's going to be pretty stagnant. And the reason being is, you think about from a $4 to $5 million jump to $16 million just for corporate personal replacement tax. It's a lot of money out of a $140 million budget. You have CPPRT dollars are going to be dried up. And then ESSER money, I mean, that's gone. The Federal Reserve, though, they've paused their hiking, but they're already talking about hiking up that again, more interest rates. They're forecasting that they'll raise interest rates as high as 5.6% before 2023 is over. And they just released that. The Fed actually on Wednesday said that they're trying to keep the key borrowing rate in a term of 5 to 5.25, but they want to bring it down to 2%. So in order to make sure that they slow down inflation, they have to bring in more percent or more quarter percentages on people when it takes to mortgages or businesses. So that money will then, especially with the businesses, it's going to get passed down onto us so that the businesses don't have to pay that borrowing rate of 5 to 5.25. So our long-term plan, the way we look at things, again, it's a living, breathing document. We need safe facilities. They need to be equipped, but it has to be for an evolving curriculum. Things have changed so much over time. The Wold study will give us some guidance with that to make sure that what we're doing in terms of curriculum is going the right way. Making sure we equitably support all student needs, because facilities, every child is different, and we need to make sure that they're all taken care of. We will update assumptions as they change so that you guys don't just see this one slide and then say, okay, well, I guess that's what the assumptions are. No, they change, right? We all know that. And then we're going to continue with that 10-year facility plan. Actually, if you don't mind, Ben, can you go back up one more slide again? Here's a reason why this is actually flat. This is also assuming that we're not taking some of those excess reserves and putting them into the 60 fund. That 60 fund is what keeps our 10-year plan sustainable, so that you don't take out a bond, so that you don't have to, you have leaky roofs. I know that we had that before, or flooding at Friendship when the floor buckled, or with Grove when we didn't have the HVAC work done. And I know that there was a graduation and every parent and kid were sweating. And as much as they loved it, they said, I had a couple people say to me, what is this? You know, and I said, I don't know, that we got to get that fixed. So it's things like that that we need to take care of. So that's why I really encourage us. It sounds fantastic. It sounds like we're in an amazing spot. But now that some of those extra funds are gone, I would just like us to think really, like, truly through to make sure that, it's kind of like what the board has been saying, that it's perfect for a child, that they have the perfect opportunities, that they have a great education. But it's also about making sure that you take good care of staff. The facilities have to be taken care of as well. Programming has to be up to date and up to speed. So right now we have a fantastic fund balance, but I would hate to see this district be in a spot where it has to pick between one or the other, because most districts have to. At this time, we don't. So we just need to make sure that we're real confident in what our decisions will be as a team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Do you want to tell us about a 30-passenger
bid? Sure. So we would like to trade in our 30-passenger bus, and we go out to bid. We do this every so often. It's a long-term plan. We take pride in our district. We take pride in how great everything looks and how well it runs. So what we do is we take that, we want to trade it in so that we can get a brand new passenger bus for $104,500, but then the trade-in dollar amount, we add that, which means a total award of $89,000. The reason why we have a 30-passenger school bus, believe it or not, we have people on staff who have their bus, their license for it. Mm-hmm. So that if, for example, the bus driving company doesn't, they follow through, or they don't do what they're supposed to be doing, we do have staff that actually do this, trained, licensed, and they do whatever they can. So we always need a backup, always something to make sure.
So it's just an emergency bus in the event.
It's more so than you think, especially at the midday. So if we have different programs and whatnot.
Sure. And does the district only owns one bus?
There's this is the one bus that I know that they use.
Okay.
So any discussion about the bus? Because if not, I would ask, maybe we can put it in the consent next time, if everybody's kind of okay with that. I think.
Use it.
I'm sorry.
I mean, spending this much money every, I'm assuming 8 years. Isn't it easier to just rent?
The premium has been incredible, especially since there have been shortages, and the fact that we even got a bus with the pieces and the chip shortage at this price was, I don't want to ever say a bargain, because there's no such thing, especially when it comes to those prices. But it's that out there. It's almost like why we went with the with our trailers, right, for the classrooms. They were not available. So if we were to having to rent one, the rental costs was almost as much as buying it out to own it. And we figured, well, we might as well own it if not. And it's sort of just like this. Yeah, our team, we have a purchasing agent that does a lot of work for us.
We good? Any other questions? Okay.
I don't know anything about buses, but it's 2015 old.
You're asking.
I just know what I'm gonna say. I have no idea.
Our biggest piece is that with a lot of changes and whatnot, when it comes to legislation, legal issues, a lot of it's special needs that we use it for, and making sure that it's as up to date as possible. Just because it's a 2023 compared to a 2015 or 2024, I mean, it's easier to explain and talk about harnesses and safety when it comes to a newer bus than it is with an older bus. We don't like just taking the chances.
I was just going to say also looking at the trade-in value, it's not going to be worth much more the longer it goes. I do know, like when we do our student council luncheons that we've been bringing students here, we utilize it. It's really nice to be able to midday transport kids in small groups without having to contract or rely on a bus company to do it. So we definitely put it to good use when we can.
Yeah, or find new ways to put it in good use to, expand the usage that we have.
It did save it saved a bunch of our routes this past year.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you all.
Okay, that moves us on to 9.0, report to the Board of Education. Wait, no.
Could you pass back the pictures and things that I sent?
Yeah, so we did not have a Facilities and Finance Committee meeting because of the 4th of July. So let's have reports from everybody else. So I think the way we're going to handle this now is as we're all on committees, what we'll do is we'll place in here the committee meeting notes. And then if you're on that committee, take a few moments to highlight things. So I'll start. Today we had our Press 112 policy meeting. There weren't any super exciting policies for us to discuss. And I think we went through and handled it pretty well. Anyone else have something? No? I mean, we can go through the committee assignments as well, which I know we didn't fully do yet.
Instead of going through them as an option, could we email a roster of who's assigned to what to the whole board? So
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah, we have the sheet finalized now with everyone's names, so we'll just send that out in the next weekly, or follow up with it. Yep, absolutely.
So otherwise, there wasn't much committee work since the last month. So if anybody has a personal report, that's fine as well. I can say what did I do? I visited, I was at the Dr. Judy Hackett's last NSSEO board meeting. I've had a meeting with some of the local board presidents. We went as an NSSEO board and dedicated a plaque to Dr. Hackett at the NSSEO PERC, which is the Parent Resource Center at Kirk School. I wanted to give a shout out to Troop 95 and Eagle Scout candidate Kellen Malone, who completed a scout project at Bird, building a custom gaga ball pit behind Bird School, which is really nice. And then I went to Summer Quest Field Day at Salt Creek last week. And I also wanted to check, did everybody sign up for the III conference who's going in November? And yes. And then finish your board training on OMA. If you haven't done that, get it done by the next meeting. Anybody else? Nothing else? It's summertime. Okay. In that case, where are we at? Informational items from the SLT.
So we just have one item on here, and it's just an update to make sure that, keeping the community aware about our educational alignment studies and our work with WOLD. We're going to enter into the next phase of looking at Brentwood a little more deeply, bringing in a structural engineer so that we can really look at what are all the possible options for resolving the overcrowding issues at Brentwood. And so that will be work that will be completed hopefully by September, so that then they can present possible options. And that also involves meeting with the Mount Prospect Park District, which I know first meeting is happening tomorrow. And then we will be following up to meet with WOLD. So we can discuss at least what is the park district interested in engaging with us and partnering with us as they own the land directly adjacent to Brentwood.
Okay. And then we don't need a closed session today, right? So can I get a motion for adjournment?
I'll motion to adjourn. Sorry, I was very excited for that one.
I'll second. So can we get a roll call? should hopefully be the last on the list. Uh-oh.
Ross.
Was it on
the back Ross?
of it? That last sheet, the very last sheet, was it on the back?
Pass it around like it is. You can take it with you, you know.
Yeah.
Get it clear.
Okay, roll call.
Zach. Aye. Espino, aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Mancia.
Aye.
Sager.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.